Chapter 685. Haotian wanted to eat, but what to eat was a problem. But no matter what it ate, it did not need to pay. But humans had to pay for their food. The headmaster asked Ning Ke to pay the bill and took them downstairs. They strolled around the capital of the Kingdom of Song and saw a branch of the Chenjinji cosmetics store. They went in and bought some powder for Sang Sang. Ning Ke felt that the headmaster was too nice to Sang Sang. He did not seem like the headmaster he knew. But his mind was occupied by those problems, and he did not have time to think about it. The black horse carriage left the capital of the Kingdom of Song and returned to the grassy wilderness. Ning Ke looked at the flock of sheep and grass in the wilderness. He thought for a while and said, "Teacher, can it be simpler?" The headmaster got off the horse carriage and looked at the endless meadow. He said, "Grass grows in the wilderness and absorbs the essence of the soil. That's why it can grow. That's what it eats." The headmaster pointed to the sheep not far away and said, "Sheep eat grass." He pointed to a dozen miles away and said, "Look, those wolves are eating sheep." "Then what does Haotian eat?" Ning Ke suddenly thought of Master Lotus's angry scolding at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine and Master Qishan's lament in the autumn rain in the temple. He thought of the doubts of many elders and said with a trembling voice, "It eats humans? Sheep can't directly eat soil and sunlight, so they eat grass. Wolves can't directly eat grass, so they eat sheep. Humans are much more powerful in comparison. We basically eat everything, but generally speaking, the higher the level of diet, the higher the efficiency of energy utilization. In the end, the higher the level of life can only eat the life of the lower level." The headmaster shook his head and said, "According to my guess, Haotian's vitality comes from the qi of heaven and earth. But it cannot eat qi of heaven and earth directly, just like sheep cannot eat soil and sunlight directly, and wolves cannot eat grass directly. So it needs a transition, and that is humans." Ning Ke said, "That's what I said just now." The headmaster said, "Ordinary people do not know what the qi of heaven and earth is. How can they change it? They still need cultivators to cultivate and increase the qi of heaven and earth to be the nutrients that Haotian needs." Ning Ke said, "You mean the qi of heaven and earth is grass, and cultivators are the sheep that eat grass. They turn the nutrients in the grass into something that Haotian, the wolf, can absorb?" The headmaster said, "That's about it." Ning Ke said, "The classics of Haotian Taoism have always said that cultivation is a gift from Haotian to human beings. According to what you said, this gift is really a bit gloomy and scary." The headmaster said, "Of course, Haotian is much more picky about food than the wolves in the wilderness. After all, it is the top collection of rules in our world. Ordinary cultivators are tasteless sheep in its eyes. Those cultivators who have surpassed the 5 states begin to have their own world and create their own rules. They purify the qi of heaven and earth in nature into their unique essence. At this point, they become delicious in Haotian's eyes." Ning Ke looked at the headmaster and asked, "What about you?" "At my level, of course I'm a beautiful sheep," the headmaster said with a smile, "but it's like the relationship between a lion and a herd of bison. If the bison is too strong or the herd is too strong, the lion will also feel threatened." Ning Ke had been very calm. When he was discussing with the headmaster, he still had the leisure to look at the grass under his feet and the cloud-like flock of sheep. In fact, his mood was extremely shaken. One moment he was like a pot of boiling sheep soup, the next moment he was like a frozen lamb jelly. He was already on the verge of collapse. He kept telling himself that this was an academic discussion and not related to reality, so he persevered. Academic discussions would eventually fall into the real world. After a long silence, he asked the most important question of the discussion so far, "Teacher, do you have any evidence?" Without evidence, this was just an academic discussion. He could let his thoughts wander to the deepest, most incredible and most gloomy places without any psychological burden. If there was evidence, then this would be a cruel and sad story that he could not bear to listen to, let alone discuss. The headmaster was very clear about his mood at this time. He said with a smile, "This is not a sad story, nor is it gloomy or scary. For countless years, the number of cultivators who can surpass the 5 states is not as many as the number of sheep that humans eat in a day. If we really talk about gloomy and scary, humans are much more terrifying than Haotian." Ning Ke could not find comfort in this sentence because he was a human, not a sheep. So he opened his eyes wide and looked at the headmaster innocently and pitifully, still wanting to hear the answer. "Of course there is no evidence for this," the headmaster said. Then he did not wait for Ning Ke to take a breath and continued, "But your youngest uncle and I have directly proved that Haotian has consciousness. It is similar to humans and a life form that is superior to humans. So it must eat. It's hard for you to deny this inference." Ning Ke's expression was very ugly, like a pig being pushed in front of a bucket of boiling water during the new year. Cultivation is indeed a very difficult thing. But for such a large number of humans, it is actually not too difficult. There will always be people who can cultivate, and there will always be people who can surpass the 5 states of the human world. The headmaster looked at him and said, "No matter how rare it is for cultivators to surpass the 5 states, it must be a very large number after tens of thousands of years. Then can you tell me, where have they gone?" Ning Ke said, "Birth, old age, sickness and death are common things. Those people might have died of old age naturally. This is not surprising." The headmaster said with a smile, "I have lived for more than 1,000 years. If I want to, I can continue to live. Birth, old age, sickness and death are indeed very unusual things for people above the 5 states." Ning Ke felt a little dry and bitter. After a moment, he said, "Nirvana of the Buddhism sect and Taoism sect become immortals. These are all described in myth. Have those people gone to heaven to enjoy the happiness of immortals?" The headmaster said with a smile, "Heaven? Where is heaven? Where is Haotian's divine kingdom? After returning to the origin of the world, do you still have yourself? If you don't even have yourself, can you still be alive?" Ning Ke and Master Qishan had discussed this question in the Lank Temple. He knew that there was no answer to this question. If he really thought about it, the answer could only point to the cold side. No one has gone to Haotian's divine kingdom and then returned. Your youngest uncle might have taken a look, but forgot to leave a few words. So I did not have an answer to this question before. The headmaster looked at the blue sky and white clouds above the wilderness and said slowly, "I finally saw the answer when I saw the divine general of light on the golden chariot." Ning Ke asked, "What is the answer?" "The answer is on his face." The headmaster said, "His face is too perfect. There is no perfect thing in the world, so he is not real. His perfection comes from thousands of old friends, so he is not one of my old friends." The headmaster was a little depressed and emotional. He seemed to be recalling many things of the past. Then he retracted his gaze and looked at Ning Quebec. He said, "I saw the unified consciousness of Haotian on his face, but not the individual consciousness. I saw eternity, so I also saw death. This was a simple world, and these were simple truths." However, before the headmaster said it, even if Ning Ke had lived 2 lives and seen the most bizarre things in the world, he could not think of these problems. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Have other cultivators never thought of these problems? When we were at the back of the mountain of the academy, you once told me that Haotian would laugh once humans were thinking. But in fact, there were many humans who didn't care about being laughed at by Haotian. Many cultivators before and after me were thinking, and many of them had the same doubts as me." The headmaster walked down the meadow and said, "Why did Lu Bai not dare to take that step? Why did he hide in the sword garret all these years? Why did the great divine priest of light betray the West Hill divine palace and come to this wilderness to establish the devil's doctrine? These are all related to these doubts." Hearing about the great divine priest of light who established the devil's doctrine, Ning Ke could not help but think of the West Hill Divine Palace. He asked, Haotian Taoism is the closest to Haotian. The sublime beings in Haotian Taoism should have a deep understanding of this. Has no one doubted Haotian other than the great divine priest of light for tens of thousands of years? Haotian Taoism seeks to ascend to heaven and become an immortal. Being led to Haotian's divine kingdom and returning to the origin of the world is their greatest happiness. It is also the ultimate goal of their survival and struggle. This is what they yearn for. Why should they be suspected? The headmaster looked at him and said, however, for many other cultivators, to live eternally with Haotian or to die alone has always been a question. To live or to die alone was a question. To live eternally with Haotian or to die alone was also a question. However, could there be an answer to all the questions? Ning Ke once again thought of what Master Lotus had said at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. Look at this dirty world. Who knows how many mediocre idiots are living in it? Don't you feel that the air you breathe is so dirty and stinky? Don't you feel that it's very difficult to breathe when you're covered by a despicable sky that has been silent for so many years? It's natural for people to eat meat in this world. They eat pigs, dogs, chickens, and heaven and earth. There's no logic to it. In my opinion, the way you and I exist in this world is the combination of our understanding of the world. After that night of bitter rain in the tomb, I have been trying hard to understand the origin of the real world. In the end, I changed the way I exist in this world. Finally, I want to change this world and find the world that I can no longer return to. I only pursue power and find a way to change the world. I don't care about the difference between Taoism and demonic Tao, nor do I care who wins or loses. The reason why I'm willing to come to the Devil Sect is because I want to see the lost heavenly book. I went to the great river of the South Jin Kingdom, to the Yueluan Kingdom, and finally to the west, to the distant unknown place. In the Xiankong Temple, I finally heard the preaching of the chief monk, saw the Buddha's light, and heard the deafening words of Buddha. However, after a few years, I finally found that the monks in the Xiankong Temple were just some filthy things. The so-called words of Buddha were deliberately mystifying, and they were no different from the fortune-tellers on the streets of the Kingdom of Song. What was more disgusting was that the Buddhism sect cultivated themselves so that they could only wait humbly in the face of the transfer of fate. I thought I had finally found the right place and had a chance to see the real world. But I didn't expect that after staying on Peach Mountain for a few days, I found that the West Hill Divine Palace is a bunch of cowardly idiots. They were all a bunch of dogs. So what if it was that run-down monastery? In the end, he was still Haotian's dog. Haha, they were all dogs. In the past, Ning Ke had always thought that what Master Lotus said was just some crazy talk. It was not until now that he finally understood how amazing this sublime being from the Devil's Doctrine, who was well versed in both Buddhism and Taoism, was. Master Lotus had always stood at the top of the cultivation world. His purpose of survival was to point to this old world and to create a new world. He was not much different from the headmaster of the academy and youngest uncle. It was just that the methods he chose and the means he used were bloodier and colder. Ning Ke knew that he might not be qualified to make this choice in his lifetime, because he might never be able to reach Master Lotus's level. But he thought about it carefully and realized that if he really had to face this choice, he might choose the same answer and method as Lotus. Master Lotus was amazing, but his teacher was even more amazing. He already knew how Lotus would choose, and he could also guess what his teacher would choose. But he did not know what his teacher would do. "Teacher, what would you do?" he asked. The headmaster of the academy asked, "What did Lotus intend to do?" Ning Ke said, "He intended to destroy the old world, create a new world, and then fight against the way of heaven." The headmaster of the academy shook his head and said, "After all, it's about eating and being eaten. Since the way of heaven doesn't eat people, why drag billions of ordinary people into this war? At this moment, the teacher and disciple had already walked to the bottom of the meadow. The water in the pot was already boiling, and the chopping board was filled with freshly cut lamb. Sang Sang raised her arm to wipe the sweat off her forehead and said happily, "We can eat now." The three of them began to eat the mutton hot pot. Mutton hot pot needs fresh meat. Frozen meat is much worse. The headmaster of the academy took out some sweet garlic and chewed it crisply. He touched his stomach with satisfaction and looked at Ning Quebec. He said, "I am a person who likes to eat." Ning Ke thought that if he used a more concise word to describe him, he would be a foodie. The headmaster of the academy picked up his chopsticks and scooped in the pot of water. He was a little disappointed to find that there was no more mutton. Then he pointed his chopsticks to the sky and said, "Since I like to eat, of course I don't like to be eaten by others. Why do I have to fight against the way of heaven? Because it wants to eat me. Then I have to think of a way not to be eaten by it. How can you not be eaten by it?" The headmaster of the academy put a piece of frozen tofu into Sang Sang's bowl. He looked at the little girl who lowered her head to eat the meat and sighed. He said, "This is indeed a very troublesome problem." Ning Ke pushed away the big black horse who was trying to snatch the meat from his bowl. He suddenly thought of a possibility. He looked at the sun above his head and said, "If Haotian needs to eat, he can just eat the sun. Why does he need to eat the chi of heaven and earth?" The wilderness was located in the cold north. Although it was spring, the sun still could not burn brightly. It was faint like a painting. The headmaster of the academy raised his chopsticks to the sky again and pointed at the sun. He said, "What if this is fake?" Writing this chapter, I thought back to the more than 10 chapters of being possessed by the devil in the second volume. I am very emotional. This kind of work may not be very effective at the time, but in the end it will give people a sense of satisfaction. Ning Ke will inherit the headmaster of the academy's great wish and Ku Haoran's spirit. But as Lotus said before his death, Ning Ke will inherit his mantle. Lotus has a very important influence on Ning Ke and Ning Ke in the second half of the story. There will be more today. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 686. Ning Ke had been in a state of extreme anxiety since the light of Buddha fell on the Lank Temple. It was not until the headmaster appeared in the wilderness that he finally felt relaxed and safe. However, he did not expect that the headmaster would bring him into a series of mysterious and depressing discussions. His spirit once again became extremely tense and anxious. He had finally thought of a possibility that could make this gloomy world a little brighter, but he did not expect his teacher's reply to be so cold and indifferent. Furthermore, he seemed to be deducing even more terrifying descriptions of the world. He finally could not take it any more and collapsed on the spot. He jumped up and waved his arms, shouting angrily, "How can it be fake? It rises in the east and sets in the west every day. Chong and is so hot in the summer. How can it be fake?" The headmaster was shocked by his reaction and said, "It's just a discussion. Do you have to be so excited?" Ning Ke was still very excited and said, "How can I not be excited? It's fine if Haotian wants to eat people. Now you want me to believe that the sun is fake. Then is this world also fake? Don't tell me that I have lived in this world for so many years just for a dream. I won't believe you even if you say something beautiful. How can it be fake? I have raised her for so many years. Did I raise her for nothing?" The headmaster thought to himself, "You're still only concerned about whether the girl was raised for nothing when you're in such an agitated, angry state. You're really unfilial." He said angrily, "The sun is fake, but it doesn't mean that you and I are fake." Ning Ke pointed to the dim sun above the wilderness and said, "This can't be fake. What is sunlight? That is Haotian's divine light. Why can't Haotian eat this? Why does it have to eat the chi of heaven and earth? Have you ever thought that the Haotian's divine light emitted by the sun is not Haotian's food, but Haotian's external form? Just like our external form is human flesh. Do we have to eat human flesh? What can't it do if it's hungry? Haotian is happy to eat his own food. Who cares? The problem is that it has other things to eat. Why does it eat itself? Does it have a unique taste? Even if Haotian can eat divine light, the divine light comes from itself. Can it eat it forever? This is the simplest calculation problem. I didn't say that the sun is Haotian herself. That's what you said. In my opinion, the sun emits light and heats up. It's the source of all nutrients. Why doesn't Haotian eat it? The quarrel between the headmaster and Ning Ke became fiercer and fiercer, and they spoke faster and faster. Their spittle flew all over the meadow. Sang Sang did not know how to persuade them, so she lowered her head to clean up the dishes and put out the fire. Does the solar energy always emit light and heat? A few billion years should not be a problem. Why can it keep emitting light and heat? This involves some rather esoteric principles. I can't explain it to you in a short time. Fine. Even if what you said makes sense, and the sun can emit light and heat for billions of years, what about billions of years later? One meal can last for billions of years. What's there to be dissatisfied about? Then can you explain clearly why there is no sun during the everlasting night? Ning Ke did not speak because he just remembered that they were in the world of Haotian, not the world that he was once familiar with and had gradually forgotten. Seeing that he was speechless, the headmaster stroked his beard and said proudly, "There are loopholes in your inference after all. It's not as reasonable as my design. When I started thinking about these things, you were still in Li Sanyang's belly. So just listen to me. What's the point of arguing other than wasting time?" Ning Ke said, "Don't mention my mother. Although you are my teacher, if you mention my mother again, I will fall out with you." The headmaster said, "Why?" Ning Ke said, "When my parents were killed, you were watching in the academy. You didn't say anything about saving them." The headmaster said, "So many people die every day. Do I have to save every one of them? You know that I will be your student in the future. Why didn't you save them? Did you think that if I saved them, I might not be your student anymore? Isn't that a little too vicious? Everyone will die. Your parents' death is God's will. I can't interfere." "Teacher, what have you been doing all your life? You are going against God's will. Why don't you interfere with God's will?" "Because I can't see what the real God's will is. Of course, I have to be careful. What if I interfere and God's will falls on me? What should I do then?" "In that case, you feel that your own life is more important than the lives of others." "That's right. So selfish that it's just. I am too important to the human world. My selfishness is selflessness." I suddenly understand something. "What is it?" "I understand where youngest uncle and second brother's pride and narcissism comes from." "Stop arguing." Sang Sang finally could not stand the master and disciple. She looked at them and said seriously, "I don't understand what you are talking about. I just want to know, where are we going next?" The black horse carriage came to a very cold place. The cold wind was angry, the dark night was like a curtain, and the stars were dim. It was the cold region of the far north, by the hot sea. However, the surface of the hot sea had been frozen for a long time. No one knew how deep the snow was, so it was more accurate to call it the snow sea. Although the big black horse was not an ordinary animal, it was also frozen by the cold here. It shivered and hid in the carriage to avoid the wind and snow blowing from the hot sea. The headmaster led Ning Ke and Sang Sang to the hot sea. Wherever they stepped, the snow that was almost as high as a man rustled, and then was blown to both sides by the wind, revealing a passage. The headmaster didn't stop until they reached the depths of the sea. He stretched out his hand and pointed to the surface of the sea. A hole about the size of a bucket appeared in the hard ice. It was dozens of feet deep, and reached the bottom of the sea that had not been completely frozen. Sang Sang tightened her fur coat and ran to the hole. She held a wooden basin and waited. Her breath turned into frost. Not long after, a few plump and tender fish jumped out of the ice cave and landed in the wooden basin. He did not know what method the headmaster had used to make these fish pass through the ice that was dozens of feet thick. The headmaster's expression turned serious and he shouted, "What are you waiting for?" Ning Kei's heart tightened. He gently pinched 2 fingers on his left hand and a fire talisman broke through the wind and snow. It accurately fell on the wooden basin and released a blazing warmth, separating the fish from the cold air. Seeing this, the headmaster nodded with satisfaction and said, "The peony fish can be frozen. When it is 70% thawed, it will taste the best. But the temperature of the sea is too low now. If you are not careful, you will freeze too much. Judging from your talisman Taoism skills, you are qualified to eat this fish." Song Song's cooking skills were very ordinary, but her knife skills were very accurate, just like her inhuman calculation ability. In a moment, there were many snowflake-like slices of fish on the felt board. Piled together, it looked like there were many white peony flowers growing on the wooden felt board. They were in a tent abandoned by the desolate man. With the support of Ning Kei's fire talisman and some thick wood, the temperature in the tent was relatively pleasant. Song Song's knife skills are much better than Man's, the headmaster praised. Ning Kei arranged the bowls and chopsticks and was ready to eat. He felt that he had eaten a little too much in a day. Although he had been eating the best food in the world with his teacher, it was still too heavy for him to carry too many banknotes. The headmaster mixed soy sauce, ginger juice, and a green seasoning. He picked up a piece of fish and put it into his mouth like a willow branch brushing the lake. After a moment, he opened his eyes and sighed. "This fish is not as fat and tender as before. We can only make do with it. Speaking of which, the hot sea is almost frozen to the bottom. I wonder how many peony fish are left." Hearing this, Ning Kei could not bear to lift his chopsticks. Or maybe it was because he was too full. He said, "Teacher, since there are not many peony fish left in the hot sea, isn't it a pity to eat them like this?" The headmaster scolded, "Idiot, it is precisely because there are not many left that we have to eat them quickly. Otherwise, where can we eat them when they are extinct?" Ning Kei said with a smile, "It's better to be frozen to death than to be eaten raw like this." The headmaster said, "As such delicious fish, being eaten by us is of course the best ending for them." Ning Kei thought, "Why don't I see being eaten by Haotian as the best ending?" The peony fish was delicious, but the portion was small. Soon, the 3 of them finished it. Most of it naturally went into the headmaster's stomach. Perhaps feeling a little ashamed, the headmaster generously used his divine power to melt 2 hot springs in some depression in the frozen snow sea for everyone to enjoy. The hot steam rose and the water was slightly hot. Beside the pools were the rocks and snow. The scene was extremely beautiful under the starlight. Ning Kei felt very comfortable soaking in the hot water. Sang Sang sat beside him and said softly, "Don't always quarrel with the headmaster." After a moment of silence, Ning Kei said, "Quarreling is just for fun. I always feel that something is wrong." Sang Sang widened her eyes and asked confusedly, "What is it?" Ning Kei said, "Don't you think the headmaster's behavior is strange? He brought us to eat so much delicious food and talked so much. Why didn't he say this when we were in the academy?" Sang Sang asked, "What are you trying to say?" Ning Kei looked at her and said, "I always feel that the headmaster is telling me his last words, just like when you were in Tile Mountain." Sang Sang was slightly startled and then said softly, "What are you thinking?" Ning Kei frowned slightly and said, "I hope I'm just imagining it. As a disciple of the academy, we firmly believe that our teacher is the strongest. Especially after this, I'm even more certain that no one can threaten him except Haotian. But I don't know why, I just feel that something is wrong." And continue writing. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 687. The hot spring in the snow made a gurgling sound. It was impossible for there to be fish in the slightly hot water, so it was the air hole that was spitting bubbles. Ning Ke thought about how his headmaster had melted into the hot spring without missing such a detail. Thinking about his previous vigilance and uneasiness, his emotions became more and more complicated. He was silent for a long time. Sang Sang felt the change in his mood. She held his arm and leaned her head on his shoulder. She did not speak as she had done in the past years, but made sure that he could confirm her existence when he was sad or sad. After her hair was cut short, it was no longer as yellow and thin as when she was a child. It had become darker, and now it was wet and stuck to her cheeks, which made her look more beautiful. Because of the silence and strange emotions in the hot spring, and the unknown fear of parting, Ning Ke felt that his arms were very empty. He wanted to hug her, so he held Sang Sang tightly in his arms. The two hugged each other in the hot spring, and then they began to kiss and touch. You are not married yet, right? At this moment, the headmaster's voice came from the hot spring next door. Sang Sang was awakened and quickly left his arms. She lifted the towel that had slipped out of her arms and put it on her slightly bulging chest. Her face was slightly red, not knowing whether it was because of shyness or heat. Ning Ke turned to look at Empress Snow and shouted, "You approved the engagement." The headmaster said, "Engagement and marriage are two different concepts." Ning Ke said, "Isn't it just a procedure of bowing to heaven and earth? It's a snowy night. I'll just say goodbye to her." The headmaster said, "Why do you need to bow to heaven and earth when I'm here? And Haotian, it may not like the two of you to really get married." Ning Ke laughed. He thought that Sang Sang was the daughter of Yama. It was indeed inappropriate for him to get Haotian's blessing and approval when he married her. Then he suddenly thought of the worry he had mentioned to Sang Sang before. He thought silently, could it be that the headmaster had already confirmed the uneasiness in advance, so he wanted to see me get married before he left? The stars in the night sky became brighter. In the bay by the snow sea, the white mist was rising. There were no red candles and no receptionist. There was only the headmaster standing on the pile of snow and a pair of children kneeling under it. This scene was like a fairyland, but it was a pity that the three people in the fairyland were not dressed neatly. They did not seem to have anything to do with the legendary immortals. The headmaster was wrapped in a large towel. It was freezing cold, but his body was still steaming like a boiled fish. The water dripping from the edge of the towel froze when it touched the ground. Ning Ke and Sang Sang knelt under the snow and kowtowed 3 times to the headmaster of the academy. They straightened up with snow on their foreheads, only to find that the headmaster was no longer on the pile of snow. There was only a wet towel that was about to be frozen. The headmaster's voice came from the depths of the snow sea along with the sound of horse hooves. "Have a good time in the bridal room. No one will disturb you. I'm going out on horseback to play for a while." It was a silent night. When Ning Ke woke up, it was still dark outside. He thought for a while and realized that the hot sea was almost in the everlasting night. It was difficult to see the sun. Sang Sang was still sleeping. She seemed to be dreaming of something. She arched her head in his arms and grinned, showing 2 white front teeth. She looked as cute as a gray rabbit. There was an extremely fragrant smell outside the tent. Ning Ke knew that his teacher was back. He quickly woke Sang Sang up and began to wash and dress. The headmaster used the leftover peony fish bones from last night to make a pot of fish porridge. Sang Sang lifted the heavy blanket and walked out of the tent. She could not help but shiver in the cold wind. She walked to the pot and took over the cooking from the headmaster's hands. Her slightly shy expression gradually turned into calmness. Compared to Sang Sang's calmness, Ning Ke had a silly smile on his face for a long time. He was still smiling even when Sang Sang went to the hot spring to clean up the dishes. The headmaster picked up the tail bone of the peony fish and looked at him. He said, "You are only in your early 20s. Why do I feel like you are an old house on fire? Ning-Ke coughed and said, We have been together for more than 10 years. It's not as exaggerated as you say. The headmaster suddenly lowered his voice and asked curiously, How do you feel? Ning-Ke looked at the fish-tail bone in his hand and said helplessly, Look at you now. You don't look like the headmaster of the academy. You can't be disrespectful just because you are old, right? The headmaster threw the fish bone into the snow and said, It's not that I don't have a voyeuristic fetish. It's just that you are too rare. You should know that your bridal room with her will definitely be recorded in the history books, so you have to remember the details. Ning-Ke did not understand what the headmaster meant. He was also a little tired, so he went to sleep again. The big black horse was also taking a nap in the tent. It had galloped for hundreds of miles on the snow sea last night and was very tired. It also felt very ashamed. Although the headmaster was not an ordinary person, it was still shameful to be ridden by a naked old man for a whole night. At noon, the hot sea was still dark and the sun could not be found. They left the settlement abandoned by the desolate man's tribe and continued to head north. As far as Ning-Ke knew, the northernmost point of the world that humans had reached was this cold region in the extreme north, which was the northern edge of the hot sea. So he was very curious about what the world in the north looked like. He also did not understand why so many powerful humans in history had not explored the north of the hot sea. Until he saw the snow-capped peak. When he was at the hot sea yesterday, he had looked to the north but did not see anything. However, not far from the hot sea today, the snow-capped peak came into his sight. It was as if he had bumped into it, which was extremely strange. The snow-capped peak was steep and towering, emitting a faint light under the starlight. It was unknown how high it was. Looking from the snowfield, it seemed that the peak was about to pierce the night sky. Ning-Ke had been to many famous mountains and rivers. The most famous and dangerous one was naturally the northern foot of Min Mountain, or Tianqi Mountains. However, compared to this snow-capped peak, Tianqi Mountain was much shorter. If you go north from any place in the south, you will reach this snow-capped peak as long as you keep walking. The headmaster looked up at the snow-capped peak under the starlight and said, When the hot sea was full of sunshine, this snow-capped peak would look even more spectacular. No one could climb it with human strength alone. So this is the northernmost point. Ning-Ke noticed two key points in this sentence. First, no matter where you went north, you would reach the snow-capped peak. Second, no one could climb it with human strength alone. Then could anyone who could climb it still be considered a human? When the black horse carriage appeared on the other side of the snow-capped peak, in front of a dark sea, Ning-Ke looked at the tall back of the headmaster and thought about this question. It was a vast sea. The reason why the sea was black was because there was no blue sky and no sunlight. Although the stars were clearer and brighter, there were fewer of them. Ning-Ke knew that what he saw was a place that had never been recorded in any ancient book. So he was very shocked. What shocked him even more was that there was a ship in this black sea. This ship was so big that the big black horse could gallop on the deck. Ning-Ke stood by the side of the ship and looked at the snow-capped peak under the night sky. He was shocked speechless. The headmaster walked to his side and looked up at the dark night sky. He said, The night begins here and gradually spreads to the south. Ning-Ke looked at him and asked, Teacher, this ship is... The headmaster said, Many years ago, I was worried that Haotian would find me and eat me. I kept thinking about how to escape and hide. I thought that since this was the beginning of the night, it should be the closest to the underworld. The Yama King's power was the strongest and Haotian's power could hardly reach here. So I built a big boat here and prepared to escape here if Haotian came to eat me. I would ride the boat on the Black Sea and never go out. Ning-Ke was stunned. Through these words, he could imagine how anxious and uneasy the headmaster had been living in Haotian's world for the past 1,000 years. Later, I became stronger and no longer had to worry about being found and eaten by Haotian. Naturally, this boat was useless. However, I suddenly found that the night here was very clean and suitable for stargazing, so I came back again. I really took a boat trip to the depths of the ocean once. I didn't expect that trip to let me discover some very interesting things. What is it? This world is not flat. Teacher, I don't understand what you mean. I brought you to this ship to let you understand. Understand what? The headmaster said. Why do I have to fight against heaven? Because Haotian wants to eat me. But even the drunkard and the butcher could hide for so many years. I can do the same. If worst comes to worst, I can close my eyes and die like Buddha. The reason why I have to fight against heaven is because I think there is something more important. What is it? When I was at the back of the mountain of the academy, I said that I had seen sunsets and sunrises in many places in this world, including this ocean. At that time, there was a sunrise here. Under the sunlight, this ocean was transparent and looked like an endless abyss. The sun set in this ocean. You said that the moon is a reflection of the sun. I said that the sun does not really rise and set. I even said that if this world was a ball, it would be easy. Now it seems that at least what I said before is that this sun is fake. Other than watching the sun, I have also watched the stars. I have watched the stars at the back of the mountain of the academy and on this big ship. Because there are fewer stars here and they are bright and clear. I told you that no matter how many years ago or how many years later, these stars have always stayed in their original positions and have not changed at all. Later on, you made a stargazing mirror. When you looked in the mirror, the size of the stars did not change, unlike people and scenery that can be magnified. This means that the positions of the stars in the night sky are fixed. They are infinitely far away from the ground but infinitely close. It cannot be measured by distance. Teacher, can you make it simpler? Simply put, this is a closed world. More simpler? This is a world without boundaries. Didn't you say that it is closed? Only when there is no boundary and it is always connected can it be considered closed. The night sky where the stars are is not the boundary? No one can touch it, so it is not the real boundary. It is just the boundary in your eyes and heart. Teacher, the more you say, the more confused I am. Haotian doesn't want the boundary to be broken, so it refuses to let people see the boundary. So it proves that this is a closed world. You are back to it. Yes, just like this world. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 688. The Academy was indeed the best in the world in all aspects. The headmaster of the Academy could be so calm and elegant even when he was being sarcastic. He could make people want to vomit blood at any moment, but they just could not. Ning Ke truly felt this, so he wisely stopped arguing with his teacher. He pointed at the star in the dark sky and said, "If the position of the star is far enough, then it will be small enough. If the position of the star is far enough, then it will be small enough. Even if it becomes larger in the telescope, it will be very difficult to see with the naked eye. Therefore, your inference is not that tenable. If it is far enough and small enough, then why can we see it from the ground?" The headmaster of the academy touched the cold side of the ship and looked up at the few lonely stars. He seemed to recall something from the past and said with a smile, "Many years ago, I once flew into the sky." It was the first time that Ning Ke knew that his teacher had done such a fearless thing. He imagined the scene of his teacher riding the wind and flying into the sky. He was extremely shocked and asked, "Why did you fly?" The headmaster of the academy turned to look at him and said, "If you see a mountain, will you want to know what is behind it? If you see a high wall, will you want to know what is behind it?" Ning Ke thought for a while and said, "I will always be curious." The headmaster of the academy smiled and said, "I am also curious. I want to know how high the sky is and if there is a boundary to this world. I want to know how far those stars are." Ning Ke was inexplicably nervous and asked in a slightly hoarse voice, "And then?" The headmaster of the academy said, I flew for a long time, but the sky was still so high and the stars were still the same. What puzzled me even more was that the ground under my feet seemed to be the same as before. How long did you fly for? What happened in the end? There were days and nights in the sky, but I was not in the mood to count the years at that time. There were eagles and then white clouds in the blue sky. In the end, there was nothing and I was the only one left. The headmaster of the academy said, I was very lonely and my heart gradually became uncertain. I also felt tired and weary. Then I turned around and flew back. When I landed on the ground again, I realized that more than 30 years had passed. Other than shock and yearning, Ning Ke could not feel any other emotions. In the rules of the world he was familiar with, the atmosphere covered the ground. The headmaster of the academy had flown for such a long time that he should have flown out of the atmosphere, or even out of the solar system. However, the headmaster of the academy's experience was different. This seemed to indicate that the headmaster of the academy's guess was correct. This was a closed, borderless world, but how was such a world constructed? The Mobius strip? He said to himself. The headmaster had never heard of this term and asked, What ring? Sang Sang had been standing silently by the side, listening to their conversation. At this time, she remembered that Ning Ke had told her about this kind of ring when she was young. She said, There is only one side to a piece of paper. You can't walk out of it no matter how hard you try. The headmaster raised his eyebrows slightly and said, Why does a piece of paper only have one side? Ning Ke came to his senses and said, Her statement is not accurate, but the general meaning is similar. The headmaster's eyes lit up. He looked at him and said, Teach me. Ning Ke said, Okay. The big ship left the coast and sailed into the dark ocean, continuing north. The snow-capped peak, which was said to be the northernmost peak in the world, gradually disappeared from their sight. To be more precise, it became shorter in their sight. Something else appeared in their sight. It was a bright red sun jumping out of the sea. Just as the headmaster of the academy had said, the sun suddenly appeared without any warning. Ning Ke did not expect to see the sunrise further north of the dark ocean. He was shocked speechless by this scene and could not understand it no matter how hard he tried. The big ship continued north, and they saw the sun more and more often. The sun stayed in the sky longer and longer, and the dark ocean gradually turned into a beautiful deep blue. As time passed, there was no longer only ocean around the big ship. Snowy islands and swimming fish began to appear. One day they even saw the coastline. The headmaster of the academy took them ashore to see the scenery on the shore. Then they boarded the ship again and continued north. Along the way they went to the cold plateau, saw the uninhabited land covered with moss, saw all kinds of strange animals, and saw the mirror-like Great Salt Lake. This was a strange world without any classic. The headmaster of the academy took them to many beautiful places and ate a lot of food that they had never eaten before. Of course, the food was delicious. One day, Ning Ke asked, Teacher, have you been to these places before? The headmaster of the academy said, I have been to many places in order to find the underworld and the edge of the world. Sometimes I took your eldest brother with me, and sometimes I traveled alone. Ning Ke asked, Why do you want to find the edge of the world? The headmaster of the academy glanced at the blue sky and said, In order to find the edge of the world, I have even been to the sky. Do you think I don't want to know the true appearance of the land under my feet? Ning Ke then realized that he had asked a very stupid question. He said, Where is the edge of the world? The headmaster of the academy said, This world has no edge. Ning Ke said, The universe is infinite. This is normal. The headmaster of the academy looked at him and said with a smile, But you know that this world is not infinite. Ning Ke could only remain silent. The big ship sailed on the sea and never encountered a storm. It fished, fed the seagulls, basked in the sun, and drank the wine that had been stored in the cabin for many years. It was a happy life, but Ning Ke always felt uneasy. The headmaster of the academy did not have any reaction. Other than enjoying life, he only did two things every day. He taught Sang Sang to cook the best food in the world and to enjoy the best things in the world. Then he ordered Ning Ke to teach him many things that did not exist in this world. Those things were knowledge that did not belong to this world. Ning Ke cut the paper tape and talked about the Mobius ring. He used a pen to draw a three-dimensional picture on the paper and described more variations. He also talked about many things about physics. However, when he came to this world, he was still young. No matter how good his academic performance was, what he could teach was very shallow. The headmaster of the academy did not ask where he got this knowledge from, and Ning Ke did not say either. The two of them seemed to have formed some kind of tacit understanding, or they already knew each other. After sailing on the sea for dozens of days, ships finally appeared on the sea. The ships quickly became crowded. The big black horse, who had been bored for a long time, stretched its head out of the side of the ship and looked at the familiar humans. It neighed happily, which scared the people on the ship. 1,000 sails sailed on the blue waves. This was a very beautiful scene. Ning Ke looked at this scene and became very silent. Although he was mentally prepared, he still found it hard to accept. Through the conversation with the people on the ships, he knew that they would reach the southernmost port of the Great River Kingdom if they went north for dozens of miles. In other words, they had returned to the human world. After leaving the wilderness, the big ship had been sailing north. How did it come to the south? The headmaster of the academy did not use his great divine power. Then how did it happen? Ning Ke looked at the sails on the sea in the distance and murmured, "If we didn't see the tip of the sail first and then the hull, it means that this world is indeed flat. Then how did we come back?" The headmaster of the academy walked to him with a glass of wine in his hand and said, "Back in the back mountain of the academy, we once discussed this question. I said that if it was a ball, it could explain many phenomena. But since the world we are in is not a ball, nor is it flat, then it can only mean that it is distorted. Just like the ring you mentioned." Ning Ke said, "I have never seen such a strange world." The headmaster of the academy took a sip of wine and said, "What kind of world have you seen?" Ning Ke looked at the deep meaning in his teacher's eyes, and did not know what to say. The headmaster of the academy said, "I have said before that you have seen other worlds in your dreams. Can you describe that world?" Ning Ke was silent for a long time and then said, "The world in my dream also has a sun. What does that sun look like? It is similar to this sun, but I can be sure that the sun in my dream is real. It is a big fireball that can burn for many years. The energy and nutrients of the human world basically come from it. As for why it can burn for such a long time, it comes from the formula that I told you a few days ago. Oh, that simple and beautiful formula that is infinitely vast. Yes, the human beings in my dream also live on a ball. The reason why they do not fall is because there is gravity between all things? Yes, teacher." Time passed slowly as the teacher and disciple discussed. This was the first time that the headmaster of the academy had come into contact with another world, and it was also the first time that Ning Ke talked about that world to someone else. The listener was filled with emotion, and the speaker was also filled with emotion. Night fell on the sea, and the night sky was filled with stars. Ning Ke looked at the night sky and said, "In the world in my dream, there are stars in the night sky, but those stars are all moving. They move in our sight mainly because of the earth under our feet. In fact, in the infinitely distant universe, they are also moving." The headmaster of the academy sighed and said, "A world that is constantly changing must be full of vitality." Ning Ke said, "The biggest difference is actually not the stars, but the moon." He pointed at the night sky and said, "If there are no clouds at night, people can see the moon. Sometimes it is round like a pancake, and sometimes it is thin like a loofah." He did not explain why the moon waxed and waned, because he knew that the headmaster would definitely understand. The headmaster of the academy looked up at the night sky, as if he saw a bright moon appear there. He smiled and said, "A bright moon born in the eternal night. That must be a beautiful scene. With my low IQ and low level of knowledge, I actually want to play with the structure of the world. This is really a strenuous and unrewarding thing. It is pure self-abuse. I will never do this in this life. I admit to everyone that I really can't write today. My brain is full of straw. Only this chapter. I always feel that if I go on like this, there is a possibility that I will drop the ball. I am indeed a person who needs to be forced, so in the first 2 months, I would say in advance how many chapters one will write tomorrow. I didn't say it recently because I once said that I would write 4 chapters the next day, but I ended up taking a leave the next day. I felt that it was too embarrassing, so I didn't dare to continue doing this. But it seems that I have to do it now. 3 chapters tomorrow. 3 chapters the day after tomorrow. I will apply for a break on the 22nd the day after tomorrow. 2 chapters the day after tomorrow, 3 on Saturday, 4 on Sunday. I have to say it first, and I have to crush myself to death, to avoid the disgusting situation of not keeping my promise again. Dang 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 dang. I invite the cat family killer. Never bankrupt, always vigorous. My old master's character guarantees. Finally, I will talk about the content of the story of Jiang Yi. I love the headmaster very much. This chapter is very beautiful. Other than the last point, I also want to say that the things that the headmaster did in the past were very beautiful, especially when he flew into the sky. Finally, I wish Miss Elon a happy birthday, and continue loving with the Taoist priest. Finally, I wish my most obedient girl, Tang Tang, a happy birthday on behalf of my leader. During dinner at night, the leader sent a text message wishing you a quick birth. Your speed in replying text messages almost made us drop our bowls of noodles. Don't be so scary in the future. The number of words above is free. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 689. When Sang Sang was very young, she would occasionally hear Ning Ke talk about the moon, Miss Kikyu, dogs and so on. She would also hear him talk about rings and bottles, but she was not very interested in them. Later, Ning Ke gradually stopped mentioning these things and she gradually forgot about them. However, the word moon would still be mentioned by Ning Ke every now and then. She always thought it was nonsense. Until tonight, when she stood beside the headmaster and listened for a long time, she finally realized that it was not nonsense but sleep talk. She raised her head and tucked her hair that had been messed up by the sea breeze behind her temples. She followed the gaze of the headmaster and Ning Ke and looked at the night sky, thinking that if there was a bright thing there, it would indeed be very beautiful. The South Sea under the illumination of the stars was quiet and gentle. The sea breeze was slightly warm and the waves were gently floating. It was like a cradle shaking its head like a baby's big ship. From the north of the wilderness they continued north until they came to the south of the world. Ning Ke had seen too much and eaten too much in the past dozens of days. He had also heard a lot from the headmaster, but he always felt that something was wrong. His eyes suddenly brightened and he said, "I always feel that I have seen it somewhere. What is it called?" The headmaster was slightly surprised and asked, "What world?" Ning Ke shook his head and said, "I forgot where I saw it and I also forgot the name. I only remember that it was a fake world, and the hero in the story was desperately rowing the boat to the side. Many of the memories in that world had become blurred." He tried his best to recall and then told the headmaster of the academy all the details that he remembered. After listening, the headmaster thought silently for a moment. He took out a short wooden stick from his sleeve and knocked on Ning Ke's head heavily. He scolded, "Idiot, do you think we are putting on a show for others?" Ning Ke first saw the headmaster on the balcony of the building of Pines and Cranes in Chang'an City. At that time, he was knocked unconscious by this famous stick. Now that he was hit again, he could not help but feel annoyed. He could not understand where the headmaster usually hid this stick, but he did not have time to think about it. He pointed to the night sky above his head and said, "Maybe Haotian is up there watching us. It's not impossible." "Of course not," the headmaster said. "The world we live in does not have the boundary in physics that you mentioned. The internal structure of the world is absolutely stable and balanced. The entropy and the law of thermodynamics that you mentioned seem to be invalid here. So according to what you said, our world is an independent world that does not have any communication with the outside world." Ning Ke nodded. The headmaster said, "This inference is based on the fact that the Haotian world is the only world. What if there is another heaven beyond the heavens and there is a real world beyond the heavens?" Ning Ke said, "It is also possible that the Haotian world is an independent world drifting in the orbit of time." The headmaster shook his head and said, "Impossible." Ning Ke asked confusedly, "Why not?" The headmaster said, "Because it's too boring." Ning Ke was speechless. He thought to himself that such a matter-of-fact tone was indeed the temperament of the academy. If there is a sky beyond the sky, and there is another world beyond the great heaven world, or rather, the great heaven world is in a bigger world, then why can't it communicate with the outside world? The headmaster continued. Then he stretched out a finger and pointed to the night sky. Starlight fell on his slender fingertip and gradually condensed into a very faint bubble of light. "According to what you have said these days, I guess the great wisdom in your dream world will probably think that the world we are in is a bubble if they know the real situation of the Haotian world." A bubble? Or a fragment of space? No, it is more appropriate to call it a bubble. A bubble floating in the outside world? Floating is not the right word. It is in the space of the outside world, but it is not in space. Teacher, I don't understand anyway. Please continue. For some reason, this bubble is not connected to the outside world. It is stable, self-consistent, independent, and even perfect. It can survive like this forever. Then, I just want to prove that your previous guess is wrong. There are no bystanders in the world of Haotian, because Haotian is also a participant. If we are acting, then it is also one of the actors. Why? If there is wisdom observing this bubble from the outside world, there will be a connection between the inside of the bubble and the outside world. Every observation will affect the state of the object being observed. Isn't this what you said a few days ago? If that is the case, the world we are in will no longer be perfect and stable. Since this has not happened, it means that there are no bystanders. Ning Ke did not know what to say. These days, he had told the headmaster of the academy the incomplete knowledge that he remembered. Who would have thought that the headmaster could remember so much and could deduce so many things so easily? Although he still did not know if the headmaster's deduction was correct, at least it sounded correct. The silver bubble of light on the headmaster's fingertip disappeared into thin air. He patted Ning Ke's shoulder and said, "I know what you are afraid of. You are afraid that all of this is just a dream or a game. That situation is indeed very annoying, but you really do not need to worry about it." Ning Ke said, "Because of your deduction, teacher?" "Not only that," the headmaster said, "no matter what kind of world we live in, as long as we are real, then the world is real." Ning Ke looked at the headmaster and praised him sincerely. "Teacher, if you live in the world of my dreams, you will definitely be the best philosopher, scientist, educator, gourmet, and revolutionary." The headmaster stroked his beard and said proudly, "So no matter where I live, it is not bad?" Ning Ke smiled and said, "It is not bad, it is extremely strong." The headmaster's eyebrows trembled slightly, and he could not suppress his joy. He said, "It is hard to say about others, but I am qualified to be a gourmet." In the early morning, the sea and the fish in the sea were awakened by the bright red morning sun. After eating the oyster porridge made by Sang Sang, the headmaster brought Ning Ke to the bow of the ship to enjoy the sea breeze and sleep. Ning Ke leaned on the soft chair and pulled the blanket up. He tilted his head and drank a mouthful of coconut juice. He felt that this kind of life was extremely happy. It would be great if they could never go ashore. However, they still had to go ashore. The ship continued to sail to the north. Indistinctly, they could see the dark coastline in the distance. There was even an illusion that they could smell the smell of the dock. Going ashore meant returning to the human world. They might face many things, especially when they thought of the uneasiness that had been shrouding him. Ning Kei's mood became a little strange. Listening to the sound of the ship breaking the waves and looking at the blue sky, he was silent for a long time. He thought of the scene of the giant golden dragon absorbing the chi of heaven and earth from the corpses of the desolate men during the battle in the wilderness. The image of Haotian in his heart became more and more greedy. Ning Kei frowned and thought, because it is a closed world, energy can only flow endlessly in it. In the end, it will still go to nirvana. Haotian must understand this. Then why doesn't he break this world and go to a wider world to find a new source of energy? First of all, Haotian is the rule of this world. If this world is destroyed or connected to the outside world, it may be destroyed directly. Secondly, I think it should be afraid. The headmaster was lying on the chair, playing with a colorful shell in his hand. Ning Kei handed the coconut over and half knelt on the chair. He asked confusedly, "It is so powerful, what is it afraid of?" The headmaster took the coconut and used his hand to break off a small piece of coconut meat from the hard coconut shell. He put it into his mouth and chewed slowly. He sighed and said, "Chewing coconut meat for a long time makes it taste better than peanuts." Ning Kei was waiting for his teacher's answer and did not expect to hear such a sentence. He smiled bitterly and said, "I have never heard of anyone eating coconut meat like peanuts." The headmaster put down the coconut and said, "You asked what Haotian is afraid of? It is afraid of the unknown." Unknown? People are also afraid of the unknown. Just like how many people have never eaten coconut meat and throw it away like garbage. Many people have never eaten chili and think it is the devil. But people also yearn for the unknown. That is why there were the first people to eat crab. That is why there are people like me who like to eat coconut meat. That is why there are people who love spicy food. In the face of the unknown, there will never be a lack of people who dare to try. Because people are afraid but also curious. The unknown and curiosity are two concepts that accompany each other. They are the most prominent characteristics of human beings. Just like what I told you that night, when we see a mountain, we always want to know what is on the other side. When we see a sea, we always want to know what is at the bottom of the sea. When we see a sky, we always want to know what is above the sky. It is because of curiosity that human beings continue to forge ahead and become more and more powerful. In this world, the starting point is the end point. It's really boring. Humans are naturally curious about the unknown. It's impossible for us to live peacefully in a closed world forever. Since the world is closed, we want to open this world and take a look at the outside world. But Haotian is not human. Although it is alive, in the final analysis, it is dry, monotonous, and boring objective rules. It is afraid of change, and has no courage to face the unknown. This is the biggest difference between us and Haotian. It is also the fundamental reason why we cannot live in harmony with it forever. A melon that is forcibly picked is not sweet. How can we get married if we have different values? How can we breathe freely when we are covered by the evil old god? So we can only pick the melon seedlings, divorce our old wives, and open up the sky. Lotus thinks so, your youngest uncle thinks so, and so do I. In fact, countless people have thought so since ancient times. Of course, we know that even if there is a sky beyond the sky, that sky may just be a bigger cage. But at least we can see more scenery and experience more things. These things may be very important or not, but I think they are worth fighting for. Reporting to everyone, there will be a regular update on the 20th. I made a mistake. There will be no change on Saturday, and there will be a normal break. However, the number of updated chapters will not change. It is the same as yesterday's chapter. This is the first chapter, and there are 2 more chapters today. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 690. The big ship landed at a port in the south of the Great River Kingdom. The black horse carriage drove onto the land and left silently. It had been more than 70 days since they left the wilderness. The Great River Kingdom in the south had also received the final news of the war in the wilderness. After the black horse carriage left the wilderness, the West Hill Divine Palace Coalition Army suddenly launched an attack on the Tang Army. However, the Tang Army seemed to be well prepared. The northern military camp's cavalry left Helan City and caught the Divine Palace Coalition Army by surprise. The flames of war once again burned in the wilderness. But this time, the war had nothing to do with the desolate. The war lasted for dozens of days. The Tang Army, which was obviously at a disadvantage in terms of the number of soldiers, finally won under the personal command of His Majesty Li Zhongyi. Because the logistical supply line was too long and there were many powerful grand cultivators in the West Hill Divine Palace, the Tang Army calmly did not continue to move forward after they were sure of their victory. They split into 2 routes and retreated to Helan City and Tuyang City. The northeast border military cavalry should have reached the edge of the wilderness. What was puzzling was that after His Majesty Li Zhongyi led the northern military camp cavalry back to Helan City, he did not immediately return to Chang'an. Instead, he stayed in Helan City. Some people guessed that the Golden Palace, which had been quiet for too many years, had made a move. More people thought that the Tang Emperor just wanted to take the Empress to a place far away from Chang'an City to enjoy some quality time. Although the war in the wilderness ended with the Tang Army's victory, it was a country against the world. No matter how powerful the Tang Empire was, it still paid a heavy price. As for the West Hill Divine Palace Coalition Army, they suffered heavy casualties. It seemed that they would not be able to start another war in a short period of time. The headmaster's battle against the heavens should have shocked the entire world. However, because of the West Hill Divine Palace's strictest blockade and the fact that everyone in the world knelt on the ground and did not dare to look directly at the bright sky, the news did not spread too far, at least outside of the Tang Empire. During the Black Horse Carriage's journey through the Great River Kingdom, the headmaster of Academy had once asked Ning Ke if he wanted to go to Mogan Mountain to have a look. Now that the Master of Calligraphy had brought the disciples of Black Ink Garden to the battle in the wilderness and had yet to return, there was only Mo Shanshan on Mogan Mountain. According to the headmaster of Academy's opinion, it was a great opportunity. Ning Ke understood what opportunity the headmaster was talking about, but he did not understand why the headmaster was becoming more and more disrespectful. Sang Sang was in the carriage, but the headmaster still used these words to provoke him, so he firmly refused. The Black Horse Carriage drove out of the Great River Kingdom and headed northeast. It passed through the hills in the southeast of the South Jin Kingdom and arrived at a lush and beautiful country. It was the West Hill Divine Kingdom. Opposite the Taoist temple in the small town, there was a stall selling roasted sweet potatoes. It was midsummer, and even the West Hill Divine Kingdom, which was favored by Haotian, was still very hot. The business of the stall should be very bad, but for some reason the stall was still open, and people would come to buy it every once in a while. Eating boiled meat around a stove on a cold and snowy day, hugging ice and eating snow food on a hot summer day. This is admittedly an extremely good enjoyment at the right time, but sometimes, people should not be able to live with themselves. Eating hot pot in the heat of summer, sweating like rain, is for a carefree feeling. Chewing sweet ice in the cold of winter is also for a carefree feeling. The headmaster of Academy said, "There are many people who want to try this kind of excitement and pleasure, or should I say, self-abuse. So this stall has been open for more than 1,000 years. You should give it a try." Ning Ke bought 3 roasted sweet potatoes and peeled them with his fingers. He said, "Is there really a roasted sweet potato stall that has been open for more than 1,000 years? Isn't it an eternal business?" "Teacher, don't lie to us," the headmaster of academy said. "More than 1,000 years ago, I often came down from the mountain to eat the roasted sweet potatoes here." This small town was deep in the West Hill Divine Kingdom and close to the Peach Mountain. Looking along the river from the stone bridge outside the town, one could see the magnificent West Hill Divine Palace in the Green Mountains. Was the mountain the headmaster of academy mentioned the Peach Mountain? Ning Ke was a little surprised and forgot to continue peeling the sweet potatoes. The headmaster of academy took the sweet potatoes from him and quickly peeled them, revealing the soft, yellow, red, and steaming sweet potato flesh. He handed it to Sang Sang and said, "I have never seen Haotian before, nor have I dealt with it directly. So I can only guess. But now it seems that my guess is getting closer and closer to the truth. That is why I feel that I am qualified to tell you the story of Haotian. Now that I have finished my story, I want to tell you some stories about me. I wonder if you too are interested." Of course, Ning Ke and Sang Sang were interested. The world only knew that the Tang Empire had the academy and the headmaster of the academy. The headmaster of academy was the highest, but few people knew the story of the headmaster of academy. Master Qishan guessed that the headmaster of academy had lived for nearly 200 years. But now Ning Ke knew that the headmaster of academy had lived for more than 1,000 years. How wonderful would 1,000 years of life be? The black horse carriage drove out of the town, crossed the stone bridge, and continued along the river. The Peach Mountain where the West Hill Divine Palace was located appeared in their sight as the road curved. The headmaster of academy finished the roasted sweet potatoes and took the wet towel from Sang Sang. He wiped the potato flesh off his lips and beard and wiped his sticky fingers clean. He pointed to somewhere in the east outside the window and said, "Many years ago, there was a country called Lu to the east of the West Hill Divine Kingdom." Ning Ke said, "Why have I never heard of it?" The headmaster of academy said, "That was a country more than 1,000 years ago. It is long gone now." Ning Ke said, "It seems to be a small country and not very famous." The headmaster of academy said unhappily, "That's because you are ignorant and have not read any history books. If you ask those senior brothers and sisters in the back mountain, who doesn't know about Lu?" Ning Ke found that he, who was always good at flattery, had made 2 consecutive mistakes today. First, he forgot to help his teacher wipe off the food crumbs on his beard. Then, he didn't understand. Since his teacher mentioned the state of Lu at this time, he must have a great relationship with the state of Lu. His casual words were like a slap to his teacher's face. So he hurriedly apologized. The headmaster of academy ignored him and looked at the country that no longer existed. He said, "I was born in Lu." Ning Ke thought that the feelings of his homeland were indeed inviolable. The headmaster of academy said again, "I am a very ordinary person." Ning Ke thought that his words were like a slap to the face of everyone in the world. The headmaster of academy did not know that his student had been adding lines in his heart. He continued, "I was originally an ordinary person, so I was like an ordinary person. I studied and learned from a young age. Then I took the exam and worked hard to become an official. Unexpectedly, I offended a powerful official after I tried a case and was forced to resign." Ning Ke asked curiously, "What kind of case?" The headmaster of academy simply said a few words. From his expression, it was obvious that he still felt indignant about what happened in the past. "You just chopped off that person's head? Do you have any evidence?" Ning Ke asked carefully. The headmaster of academy said, "No evidence, but everyone knows that he is an evil person." Ning Ke said sarcastically, "You judged a case without evidence. I don't know how the law of the Tang Empire became the rule of the academy." "Teacher, why did you kill that person? Is he an eyesore to you?" The headmaster of academy said angrily, I said that Haotian did not have any evidence, but he still went against it. Ning Ke said nervously, "That's because you also did not like Haotian." The headmaster of academy was stunned. After a long silence, he suddenly laughed and said, "Maybe you are wrong. I was still young back then, and my temper might have been a little bad." Ning Ke did not forget to take advantage of the headmaster of academy. He laughed and said, "Teacher, you have lived for more than 1,000 years, but your temper is not much better." The laughter stopped abruptly. Ning Ke touched the bump on his head caused by the rod and felt that he was such an idiot. He knew that the headmaster had a bad temper, but why did he still say such things? The black horse carriage arrived at the foot of the Peach Mountain. Ning Ke became a little nervous, excited and expectant. However, he was disappointed that the priests and deacons of the Divine Hall did not notice the existence of the black horse carriage. The headmaster of academy did not seem to want to go up the Peach Mountain to cut off the peach blossoms. He stopped the horse carriage under a big tree to enjoy the shade. I had nothing to do after being stripped of my position. I always felt that it was inappropriate to manage the affairs of the clan. Moreover, the world was chaotic at that time, so I had to live in seclusion. I remember that I was already in my 30s. I did not know why, but I suddenly became interested in the classics of Haotian Taoism. So I began to read and cultivate. I successfully reached the initial awareness state and then the perception state. As I said before, I was just an ordinary person. My comprehension and aptitude were very ordinary. Just like ordinary cultivators, I broke through the state step by step. But when I reached the no-doubt state, I began to stagnate. In the eyes of ordinary people, even the most ordinary cultivator was great. Therefore, I was not dissatisfied with my cultivation speed. Even if I stagnated, I felt that it was normal. The clan had a lot of opinions about me being stripped of my position. But when I could cultivate, their attitude towards me suddenly changed. They sent me to the Peach Mountain to be a deacon. The headmaster of academy pointed at the Divine Hall outside the window and said, "When I arrived at the Divine Hall, a deacon asked me what I wanted to do. I thought that the clan must have spent a lot of money, so I might as well buy an official position with the money." Sang Sang nodded. She felt sad and thought that it would be good to buy cosmetic. Ning Ke also felt that it made sense. He was even more curious about the headmaster's choice. He asked, "What did you choose?" The headmaster of academy said, "I thought that since I liked reading classics of Haotian Taoism, I wanted to be the manager of the library." Ning Ke slapped his thigh and said, "Good choice." The headmaster of academy looked at him in confusion. Ning Ke praised, "All the most powerful and nature-defying figures must have been a librarian. Teacher, you did not like Haotian. I think it was destined from then on." There is one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 691. The headmaster had told his eldest disciple and many others that he was not omniscient or omnipotent. In many people's eyes, this was normal. However, in the eyes of eldest brother and other disciples of the academy who unconditionally and unreasonably trusted their teacher, the headmaster's evaluation of himself was obviously too modest and almost arrogant. In fact, the headmaster's understanding was very clear. For example, at this moment, he could not understand the humor in Ning Ke's words, nor could he feel the strong feelings of praise in Ning Ke's words. He thought about it and did not understand, so he decided not to spend time thinking about it and began to tell his own story. From then on, I began to be a Taoist librarian in the West Hill Divine Palace. I entered the library to read, so I naturally would not miss such a great opportunity. So I began to read nonstop. As I read more books, I was inexplicably enlightened, broke through the no-doubt state and entered the see-through state. Then, I continued to move up, and my cultivation state became good. It was at this time that I found that when I was reading every day there was a Taoist who had been reading in the library. You must know that the Divine Hall at that time was different from the Divine Hall now. Taoists liked to go to the human world to eat and drink and act like a tyrant. No one dared to control them, so the Taoist at that time did not like to read. That Taoist seemed very special. Because it was too long ago, the headmaster's memory was a little fuzzy. He thought silently for a moment and confirmed that he did not remember the wrong time sequence. He continued, "The Taoist and I read in the library for many years. Later, we read all the scriptures and books in the library. Then we began to feel bored. At that time, the world was chaotic. Although the aristocratic families also liked to collect books, there was really nothing good. I discussed with the Taoist and thought that there were still 7 volumes of tomes of arcane in the Jisho Abbey that we had not read, so we slowed down." Ning Ke asked in surprise, "You mean, you and the Taoist went to the Jisho Abbey to read the tomes of arcane because you were so bored that you wanted to find books?" The headmaster said, "At that time, I was still not very interested in cultivation. If it were not for the fact that the 7 volumes of tomes of arcane were absolutely unique, why would I think of going to the deep mountains to find the Jisho Abbey?" Ning Ke was speechless. He found it really difficult to understand the way people thought 1,000 years ago. And then? Everyone in the West Hill Divine Palace knows about the Jisho Abbey, but they don't know where it is. The Taoist and I thought it would be difficult to find it, but we found it so easily. That's because you and that Taoist are not ordinary people. And then? And then? Of course, he was reading in the Jisho Abbey. The Taoists in the monastery definitely won't let us see, so we can only sneak a peek. As long as they don't find out, it's fine. You've read all 7 volumes of the tomes of arcane. If there were more scrolls, I would naturally be able to read more. Please continue with your story. The 7 scrolls of tomes of arcane are very interesting. However, the more we read, the more puzzled the Taoist and I became. Especially after we finished reading the Ming hand scroll, we started to have some doubts about this world. The headmaster said, "But these were not my main concerns at that time." So I waited for the Taoist to finish reading the 7 volumes of tomes of arcane before returning to the West Hill Divine Palace with him. Who is that Taoist? After a few years, that Taoist entered the Divine Hall of Light and became the Great Divine Priest of Light. The headmaster glanced at Sangsang and said, "Just like her teacher, they are both admirable, but also not admirable. They are so stubborn that it makes people not know whether to laugh or cry." Ning Ke thought of a possibility. He counted the time with his fingers and asked, "Is it that Divine Priest of Light? Who else could it be?" The headmaster shook his head and said, "The Divine Hall asked him to preach in the wilderness, so he went. If he wanted to betray the sect, then so be it. However, he ran to the Jisho Abbey and stole the Ming hand scroll. How annoying." Ning Ke said, "I remember that Haotian Taoism asked the Divine Priest of Light to bring the Ming hand scroll to the wilderness." The headmaster said sarcastically, "Haotian Taoism is best at saying things that don't embarrass themselves. In fact, when the Jisho Abbey found out that the tomes of arcane were stolen, it was a big deal. They even found out that I went to read books with that guy many years ago. I had no choice but to leave the Peach Mountain. Fortunately, the Divine Hall did not pay attention to a nobody like me. After leaving the Peach Mountain, I toured the world. As I said before, the world was chaotic, there were endless wars and darkness. It was much worse than the world now. Haotian Taoism was unified and the Divine Hall was the most powerful. However, they did not care about worldly affairs. Cultivators followed and humiliated ordinary people. The imperial power in the secular world was extremely low and the world was like a plate of loose sand. The only exception is the desolate empire in the wilderness. Because the desolate men are born with strong bodies, cultivators do not dare to be too reckless. That guy stole the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane because he had doubts about Haotian. Therefore, his choice of the wilderness was not unexpected. You should know what happened to that guy later on. He betrayed the West Hill Divine Palace and used the tomes of arcane to create the Enlightenment doctrine, which later became the Devil's Doctrine. Ning Ke was shocked to hear these stories from thousands of years ago. It was not until now that he completely understood why the Academy had never been divided into the Devil's Doctrine. Whether youngest uncle or himself joined the Devil, the headmaster did not care. He even asked third sister to accept Tang Xiaotang as a disciple. It turned out that the Devil's Doctrine Grandmaster was an old acquaintance of his. There was an old friendship between them. Even to this day, I still think that guy is just messing around. The Devil's Doctrine that he created is so deformed and boring. But I have to admit that his actions at that time caused a great shock in the world. It also indirectly led to some relatively good result. What results? Haotian Taoism was wary of his preaching in the desolate empire, so we had to let the central plains be more peaceful. The divine hall was slightly purged, so that the common people in the world would have a much better life. Of course, the so-called better life was just that they could live for a few more years and be slightly stronger. If there was a war in the future, they would be able to fight. In fact, the lives of the common people were still extremely bad. They were no better than dogs. People died everywhere in the barren mountains and rivers. After a moment of silence, the headmaster said, "Those who have not experienced the chaos of the past can hardly understand the beauty of the world now. Sometimes, I also find it hard to understand how people can survive such chaos and misery. They can still reproduce and live. I can only say that the vitality of human beings is very terrifying. But I think that people should not live like this. They should not live like beasts. They should not live worse than dogs. We should eat dogs, not be eaten by wild dogs." The headmaster's expression became solemn. He looked at Ning Ke and said, "I want to end the chaos in the world. I think that first there should be some rules and then some benevolence. If it can open people's intellect and trust, then it will be a better result. So I started to teach in the countryside. I want to tell these principles to the world." Ning Ke was silent and listened calmly and attentively. What's annoying is that no one is willing to listen to my lectures. In some places, it's because they're too poor and people worry about eating and drinking every day. They're not in the mood to listen to my lectures. In some places, it's because the Taoist temples don't want me to teach. In other places, it's because the people don't like me teaching because I charge money to teach. You can choose not to charge me money. What can I eat if I don't charge? I have to eat. Teacher, you are really a realistic idealist. I like this compliment very much. Back then, I kept running into walls in reality, but I did not give up on this dream. I just became much more sober and gradually understood that if I wanted to influence the whole world, it was meaningless no matter how strong I was. I needed a strong secular regime or a religion like Taoism to help me. At this time, I was teaching in Xianying Tuwei, west of the Wei River. A young man came to me in the middle of the night after listening to my lecture. I thought he wanted to be my disciple, so I asked him to go to the east of the Tuwei and get 3 pounds of meat. I did not expect that he did not come to be my disciple, but to recruit subordinates. To put it simply, that night the young man talked about his dream. I found that his dream was to end the chaos. So I liked it and continued listening. You became his subordinate just like that. How could I become someone else's subordinate? I just promised to help him. Teacher, that young man, his surname is Li, right? Yes. The black horse carriage had left the Peach Mountain and arrived at Chang'an. The desolate man was strong and the West Hill Divine Palace could not fight against them with only cultivators, so they began to restore order in the world. The armies of various countries gradually grew and the imperial power gradually rose. The Tang Empire took this opportunity to accumulate its strength. Then it experienced several years of favorable weather and gradually became stronger. That was how it managed to build Chang'an. The headmaster looked at the 1,000-year-old city outside the window and thought of the scene when the city was built. He showed a nostalgic expression and said, "When I built this city, it should be the happiest days of my life." Ning Ke looked at the giant bricks and moss on the wall of Chang'an. He thought of how he had once sighed about this magnificent city and how he had been shocked by the greatness of the predecessors who built Chang'an. He could not help but be speechless. Ever since the headmaster began to tell the story, he was often speechless. When you found that the most legendary and greatest years in the history of the world, the glory that could not be washed away by the wind and rain, you could only use silence to express your inner shock. After a long time, Ning Ke came to his senses and murmured, "Chang'an was built by you. Naturally, the god-stunning array was built by you." The headmaster said, "Yensei gave you the array but some Taoists in the Southern Gate Temple were not convinced. This array was originally mine, so it was natural to pass it to you." Ning Ke said, Of course. What happened after that?" Later, the Tang Empire began to conquer other countries and was ready to unify the world. Why did they not succeed? They were invincible in the world, but there was still the West Hill Divine Palace. "Teacher, you didn't do anything. How can someone like me do anything?" Not doing anything is the biggest deterrent. Alright, I admit that I was strong back then, but not strong enough. At least, I was not confident that I could destroy the West Hill Divine Palace and suppress all its disciples without alerting Haotian. "Teacher, for you to be able to say such words, you are already very powerful." At that time, the truly strong ones in the world were the desolate man. That guy had been preaching in the wilderness for many years. The devil's doctrine flourished and was ready to go south. The Tang Empire was located in the north and bore the brunt of the attack. There was no way to avoid the desolate man and was forced to send troops deep into the wilderness. I also fought with that guy. Who won? I did not like to fight as much as your youngest uncle. I did not fight many times, but I never lost. Heavens, I think of a movie title, I Am Legend. I rub my hands. I really like to write such things. I will finish with 3 chapters today and 3 more tomorrow. Please vote for me. Thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 692. They hadn't seen Chang'an for a long time. The black horse carriage traveled slowly on the Vermilion Bird Avenue. Ning Ke and Sang Sang lifted the curtains and looked at the familiar street view. Just like under the divine palace of the mausoleum, no one in Chang'an noticed the black horse carriage, as if they couldn't see it at all. From the Vermilion Bird Avenue to the east, the buildings gradually became shorter, and they arrived at the eastern city. The horse carriage entered the long-awaited Lin 47th Street and stopped in front of the old brush pen shop. The quarrel between Mr. Wu and his wife still echoed in the fake antique shop next door. There were still oil stains left by the hot and sour noodle slice soup stall at the entrance of the alley. With a creak, the door of the old brush pen shop opened. Ning Ke and Sang Sang led the headmaster into the backyard to rest. They heard a cat meow and a shadow flashed over the wall. He looked at the wall and smiled. Then he went to the well to fetch water and cleaned up with Sang Sang for cooking. This was the first time the headmaster came to the old brush pen shop, so he had to have a proper meal. A few simple dishes of vegetables and meat were quickly prepared and placed on the table in front of the shop. The headmaster took a few bites with his chopsticks and showed a satisfied expression. Sang Sang, who was very nervous, heaved a sigh of relief. After the meal, Sang Sang stood behind the headmaster and massaged his shoulders. The atmosphere was very peaceful and comfortable. However, Chang'an in midsummer was always annoying. Ning Ke took a fan and stood in front of the headmaster. As he fanned, he asked, "Why didn't you take the Ming hand scroll back?" The headmaster said, "When I was reading in the Jisho Abbey, I didn't think about stealing it. Naturally, I wouldn't take it back now. I thought it would be good to leave it for that guy's disciples." Later, when your youngest uncle destroyed the devil's doctrine, I didn't want Haotian Taoism to take it back, so I took it back. They didn't stay in the old brush pen shop for too long. After drinking tea, the headmaster left with the two and continued to wander in the horse carriage. As they strolled, they arrived at the northern city of Chang, and could vaguely see the imperial city. It was midsummer, and the heat in Chang'an was unbearable. There were not many people on the street, but the trees were very lively. They were lush and luxuriant. It was very beautiful against the palace walls. After the Tang Empire defeated the Empire of the Desolate, the West Hill Divine Palace had no choice but to acknowledge the status of this country and acquiesced to its uniqueness. The other countries were influenced by the Tang Empire and began to revise their laws. Haotian Taoism and cultivation sects gradually returned more power to the hands of ordinary people. The headmaster looked at the imperial palace not far away from the window. After a moment of silence he said, "This is a very good thing. Ordinary people don't know how to cultivate Taoism and have less awe. Instead, they can find a way to balance the conflict of interest. However, ordinary people also have one drawback, and that is that they age too easily and their lifespans are too short. Emperor Li is good at strategy and military command, but he is an ordinary person after all. He will also grow old, and when he is old, he is easily confused, and sometimes his ideas will conflict with mine. During those years, I built an academy in the south of Chang'an and studied there. I didn't want to see him, lest he got angry." Ning Ke was curious about how the story of the founding emperor of the Tang Empire and the headmaster of the academy would develop. He asked, "What happened next?" The headmaster said, "Later on, Emperor Li was really muddle-headed. I don't know where he heard the rumor that in order to live forever, he needed to eat my flesh. He actually wanted to deal with me." Ning Ke asked worriedly, "Then what did you do?" The headmaster said, "Haotian wanted to eat me, but I didn't let alone Emperor Li. When he wanted to deal with me, I went into the imperial palace and killed him." Ning Ke said in shock, "You killed him just like that? What else can I do if I don't kill him? Did you want the 3 departments to hold a trial and sentence him to death by 1,000 cuts?" "Teacher, that's not what I meant. Anyway, the first emperor of the Tang Empire was killed by me just like that. Although I didn't feel sad, I still felt a little regretful. So I thought of an idea. I will teach the new emperor. In this way, even if the new emperor is confused, he will not want to eat my flesh." Ning Ke thought that this was probably the historical reason why the academy had such a high status in the Tang Empire. The new emperor is a very filial child. Very good. The headmaster stroked his beard and said with satisfaction. Ning Ke thought silently, "Teacher, you killed his father and could kill him at any time and set up a new emperor. What else could poor Emperor Taizong do except to be filial to you?" The subsequent emperors of the Great Tang were all outstanding, and the bloodline of the Li clan was something to be proud of. After everything was on the right track, a lazy person like me naturally didn't want to bother with the matters of the court. From then on, I never stepped into the imperial palace again. The headmaster's gaze passed through the window, through the lush green trees, through the hot golden river, and fell on the vermilion palace wall. He looked calm, but deep in his eyes there was a hint of sadness. The black horse carriage slowly moved away from the imperial palace. When it reached the bustling area, it moved forward under the lazy gaze of the shop assistants and stopped in front of a shop named Chenjinji Cosmetics Store. The headmaster walked into Chenjinji Cosmetics Store and bought a big box of powder for Sangsang. "Teacher, why do you spoil her so much?" Ning Ke looked at Sangsang's small face, which was covered with powder, and could not help laughing. He said, "My Sangsang is becoming whiter and whiter." Sangsang bowed her head shyly and thanked the headmaster. The headmaster smiled and waved his hand, indicating that he did not mind. The black horse carriage left Chenjinji Cosmetics Store and continued southward on the straight and spacious Vermilion Bird Avenue. This time, the carriage passed by the famous Vermilion Bird stone painting. The wheels of the carriage rolled over the flagstones. The tourists from the Tang Empire were looking at the Vermilion Bird painting under the scorching sun with umbrellas. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew and they squinted their eyes. Amidst the wind, the eyes of the Vermilion Bird painting moved slightly, as if it was coming to life. But after a moment, it lost all its liveliness, as if it had lost its soul. In the dark carriage, a little bird with a bright red body suddenly appeared. The little red bird moved around on the floor, and its movements were a little clumsy. It looked very cute, but its red feathers seemed to contain a very scary power, which made people shudder. Chirp, chirp. The little red bird walked in front of the headmaster and chirped twice. The headmaster stretched out a finger and gently touched its head. The little red bird rubbed against the headmaster's finger and turned, looking very happy. This is the Vermilion Bird? Along the way, Ning Ke had heard and seen many shocking things. Now he knew that Chang and City and even the god-stunning array were all his headmaster's tricks. At this time, when he saw the Vermilion Bird suddenly appear in the black horse carriage, he was still shocked but not panicked. He imitated the headmaster and carefully tried to touch the legendary Vermilion Bird. The little red bird suddenly turned around and stared into Ning Ke's eyes. It looked very dignified, with vigilance, disgust, contempt, and disdain in its eyes. Ning Ke recalled the time when he and Sang Sang held the big black umbrella and looked at the Vermilion Bird painting in the rain. He also recalled the time when he was seriously injured and lying under the Vermilion Bird painting. He hurriedly tucked the big black umbrella under his buttock. The little red bird turned its head to look at Sang Sang, and its eyes suddenly became very confused. The black horse carriage drove out of the south gate of Chang and headed for the academy. Ning Ke had followed this road to the academy to study and cultivate in countless mornings over the years. He was very familiar with the scenery on both sides of the road, so he looked away after a few glances. He wanted to ask the headmaster about the changes in the academy over the past 1,000 years, but then he realized that there was no need to ask. The academy could have many deans, but there was only one headmaster. You are the first and current dean of the academy. What have you been doing over the years? If you really don't want to care about the world, why did you come out and take over the academy again? I have been very busy over the past few hundred years. I remember when I was in charge of the library in the West Hill Divine Palace, and I liked reading. Now that I have the academy, of course I have to go around the world to collect books, which is very time-consuming. The headmaster said, and don't forget that I have been flying in the sky for so many years to prepare for this. It took me even more years to make up my mind. In the process of traveling around the world, I have searched for the legendary underworld, the edge of the world, for delicious food, and for some people. It took me a lot of time. Ning Ke asked, "Who are you looking for?" The headmaster said, "I want to find some people like me." Ning Ke asked, "Have you found them?" The headmaster said, "I found the drunkard and the butcher. From them, I learned more about Haotian and the everlasting night. So I wanted to invite them to do something together." Ning Ke asked, "They didn't agree?" The headmaster nodded and said, "Yes." "Then what did you do?" "I fought with them." "Who won?" Ning Ke waved his hand and said, "Sorry, this is a stupid question." The headmaster sighed and said, "Of course they couldn't beat me. What annoyed me was that they still wouldn't listen to me." "What do you want to do?" Ning Ke asked. The headmaster looked at Ning Ke and said, "Didn't you ask me what I have been doing all these years?" Ning Ke nodded. The headmaster said, "These years, I have spent most of my time thinking about a problem." Ning Ke asked, "What problem?" The headmaster said, "How to defeat Haotian." It became very quiet in the black horse carriage. Only the headmaster's voice seemed to be floating and falling on the floor. The Vermilion Bird's scorched footprints were as light as water. This cultivation journey had already revealed the truth. The headmaster and his disciple had discussed more specific problems. However, when this sentence finally appeared so clearly and simply, it was still shocking. Ning-Ke was silent for a long time. He raised his head and asked, "Master, have you thought of a way?" The headmaster said angrily, "If I have thought of a way, why am I still in this horse carriage?" The first chapter. There are 2 more chapters today. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 693. The black horse carriage was on the ground, and the ground was the human world. If the headmaster had already thought of a way to defeat Haotian, he would have left the human world and fought in the sky. He would not be in the horse carriage. I thought for a long time, but I couldn't think of a way. The headmaster said, "After a few hundred years, I met someone. His name was Ku Haoran, your youngest uncle." Ning-Ke's gloomy mood brightened up when he heard the name of youngest uncle. He was excited because he knew that youngest uncle's great spirit was in him now. The headmaster of the academy said, "Your youngest uncle has an outstanding aptitude and can be said to be extremely talented. Whether it's cultivation or other things, he can learn them all at once. He has never encountered any knowledge barrier that the Buddhism sect talked about. Correspondingly, this guy's temper is a bit strange. There are many things that he is unwilling to learn." Ning-Ke said, "I heard from Lotus that youngest uncle only knows Haoran's sword in his life. But Lotus also said that youngest uncle has reached the state of mastering one method and mastering all method. No matter what his title was, I think there is a limit to the state that killed himself." The headmaster said, "Back to what happened in the past. When I saw your youngest uncle, my eyes lit up. I thought that my aptitude was too ordinary, so I couldn't think of a way to defeat Haotian. His aptitude was far better than mine. If he received my careful training, then maybe he could really fulfill my wish. And then? As I said before, your youngest uncle has a strange temper. Is it pride? Isn't pride strange? Teacher, you are quite proud too. I have always been objective and fair. Teacher, we got sidetracked. Your youngest uncle was very proud. I wanted to take him as a student, but he refused. He said that I was not qualified to take him as a student. I asked him, if I was not qualified, who else in the world was qualified to be his teacher? The headmaster said, at that time, your youngest uncle answered that no one in the world was qualified to be his teacher. His teacher could only be himself. I was a little unhappy at first, but then I realized that he was right. Wasn't I also self-taught? But I still wanted him to take fewer detours on the path of cultivation, so I said that I would accept a disciple on behalf of my master. He asked who our master was, and I told him that we didn't have a master, so he agreed. After a short pause, the headmaster continued, I've always wanted your youngest uncle to take fewer detours on the path of cultivation. But later on, I realized that this method of education was indeed problematic. Ning-Ke asked confusedly, what problem? The headmaster said, he didn't take any detours. He walked too fast and could fly at any time. This sentence was difficult to understand, but Ning-Ke understood it. Your Uncle Master's realm increased too quickly. I began to feel uneasy, so I continued to travel the world. I met your eldest senior brother in a small town, and then I accepted Jun Mo. After that, your youngest uncle left the academy on a donkey. He first entered Chang'an and wandered around the world. Then, he destroyed the Devil's Doctrine and finally returned to the academy. He grew at an unimaginable speed. Everyone thought that destroying the Devil's Doctrine with a single sword was your youngest uncle's peak state. In fact, after he returned to the academy, he became even more powerful. He finally experienced the same distress as me and had the same doubts about the sky. So he decided to fight with Haotian. I objected and told him that he couldn't defeat Haotian. But he told me that he wouldn't know if he could win without a fight. Senior brother, of course, this kind of thing should be discussed after a fight. Ning Ke lowered his head in silence. He thought about the second brother's way of speaking and doing. He did have some of the youngest uncle's spirit. Then he looked up at the headmaster and asked calmly, "And then?" The headmaster was silent for a moment and said, "And then he went to fight. And then he lost. And then he died." After saying these 3 sentences, the headmaster smiled. His smile seemed a little lonely and desolate. Ning Ke was far away from the spiritual world of the headmaster and the youngest uncle, but he could feel the headmaster's emotions at this time. The more powerful a person was, the lonelier he would be. The drunkard and the butcher were not the same kind of people. The headmaster finally met a like-minded younger brother in the mortal world. But they didn't have the chance to fight side by side, so they parted ways. The headmaster calmed down and said, "After that, I put all my energy into teaching your eldest brother and second brother. I summed up some principles with my experience and past in the human world. I taught Man with benevolence and righteousness and Junmo with etiquette. They didn't disappoint me and learned very well. Unfortunately, they were learning from me. No matter how well they learned, they could only be the second me or the second Ku Haoran. There was not much hope for them to defeat Haotian. She was your third sister. Her cultivation was different from others, but she was still in the cultivation world of Haotian. So I began to think about other possibilities. I traveled around the world and looked for the most talented people in various fields. I let them go back to the academy to study, such as your 5th brother Song Qian and Wang Qi, but this time, I didn't try to let them climb on the road of cultivation. Instead, I let them study their hobbies and try to find a way to break the world of Haotian in the world of numbers and lines. When I was in the West Hill, I told you that the starting point of my cultivation was Haotian Taoism. So I set my eyes on Haotian Taoism again. Your 12th brother Chin Pipi was a rare genius of Haotian Taoism. He had the best characteristics of Haotian Taoism, but he was not stale at all. So I chose him. Unfortunately, the time was too short. Now it seems that my attempts may not succeed. Even if there is a possibility, I can't see it. Fortunately, I still have you." Ning Ke had been listening quietly. Until he was mentioned, he looked up in surprise and said, "Headmaster, my cultivation talent is much worse than Chin Pipi's. If we talk about talisman Taoism, mathematics, or chess, I am not qualified to be compared with my senior brothers and sisters. Why did you choose me?" "First of all, because you are a very selfish person." "Headmaster, are you praising me or belittling me?" The headmaster said, "1,000 years ago, I educated the world with benevolence and righteousness, solidified morality with etiquette, and reduced chaos with law. Now, whether it is the Tang Empire or your 2 senior brothers, they can all practice these perfectly. However, these can only allow the peaceful survival of human society, but cannot produce a strong enough destructive power. Only selfishness can drive human beings forward." Ning Ke said, "I have only heard of love saving the world, but I have never heard of selfishness saving the world." The headmaster said, "Sometimes, destroying the old world is saving the new world." Ning Ke sighed and said, "You put me under a lot of pressure." The headmaster laughed and then gradually stopped. He looked at him quietly and said, "Of course, the most important reason why I chose you as my last disciple is that I can never understand you. Wei Guangming saw a little boy in Chang'an on the Peach Mountain. Of course, I saw it too. He thought you were the wife of Yama, but I don't think so. But I really can't understand how there can be a person in the world who was born with knowledge. And you look so ordinary." The headmaster said, "It was not until recently that I was finally sure that you are not from the world of Haotian. You are from another world." Then I got the answer. Just like how to defeat Haotian, the fact that Ning Ke was a time traveler was not mentioned during the journey. But the headmaster and he had already tacitly accepted it. Ning-Kay looked down at the scorch mark left by the vermilion bird on the floor, and was silent for a long time. Then he looked up at Sang-Sang. He had nothing to worry about when it came to the wisdom of the headmaster. The headmaster would definitely not think that he was a monster and directly suppress him. But what about Sang-Sang? What would Sang-Sang think? Sang-Sang did not think of anything. She was a little surprised, but there was no fear or repulsion. She just looked at Ning-Kay curiously. When Ning-Kay looked at her, she smiled. Ning-Kay's heart warmed. He did not care that Sang-Sang was the daughter of Yama. He only cared that Sang-Sang was Sang-Sang. Sang-Sang did not care which world he was from. As long as he was himself, that was enough. I have not found a way to defeat Haotian yet. Your youngest uncle did not succeed. No one in this world has ever succeeded. That is because this is Haotian's world. The headmaster looked at Ning-Kay and said with a smile, "But you are not from the world of Haotian. At least your soul and your thoughts are not the original creatures of this world. If this world is a dead end of the cycle of life, death, and light, and you are an outsider, then you are the one to break it. That is very good." Ning-Kay had previously said that he was under a lot of pressure. Hearing these words, he finally felt the real pressure. He subconsciously looked at the clouds outside the window and looked at the azure sky. Suddenly, he felt that the whole sky had become something incomparably heavy, pressing down on his consciousness and heart to the point that they were about to break apart. Was he going to go against heaven? It was an interesting story in novels for the weak to say that they wanted to go against heaven. But for the headmaster, who had been quiet in the human world for thousands of years, thinking hard and trying to break the blue sky and let the world breathe fresh air, it was not a story, but the most vivid and heroic struggle. Ning-Kay was a very selfish person. He had never thought about fighting for anything except a few things. But at this moment, he suddenly found that he had to fight for the liberation of all mankind. What does it have to do with me? That was what he was thinking, but he couldn't say it. Just as the headmaster said, he was not from this world. But he came to this world and felt so much sadness, pain, parting, anger, joy, and happiness. Why did all this happen? Everything had a reason. Life had a purpose. But this reason, this purpose, was so heavy that he could not bear it. He raised his head and looked at the headmaster quietly. He was silent for a long time. Just when the headmaster and Sang-Sang thought that he was going to refuse or escape, Ning-Kay asked, "How can I be as strong as you?" There is one more chapter. Keep working. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 694. How to defeat Haotian and how to be as powerful as you seem to have nothing to do with each other. But in Ning-Kay's eyes, cultivators had to be as powerful as the headmaster to be qualified to go against heaven and to explore those esoteric questions. How did the headmaster cultivate? This was definitely difficult to simply imitate or learn, but he could ask for guidance, just like his youngest martial uncle back then. He could avoid some detours. Some people say that life is a form of cultivation. Although it sounds sour, it's the truth. The longer you live, the higher your cultivation will be. My cultivation talent is also very ordinary. It's just that I've lived a bit longer. The headmaster said, "How can you be as powerful as me? First, you have to learn to fight against time, one of the two most powerful rules of Haotian. You have to live as long as possible. The longer you live, the higher your state will be, and the longer you can live. It's an endless cycle." Ning-Kay said, "Teacher, what you said is as good as nothing." The headmaster said, "That's what I did, so that's all I can say." Ning-Kay looked at the wrinkles on the headmaster's face and asked, "Teacher, you are the most powerful person in the world. You can fly above the clouds and live forever. Strictly speaking, you are not an ordinary person, but even beyond the scope of human beings. You can be like the drunkard and the butcher, enjoying your time quietly and quietly. Why do you have to go against heaven? For the human world? First, we have to understand something. If the world is monotonous, limited, and boring, then the longer you live, the more boring you will be. Only an infinite world can bring infinite joy. I have seen all the sceneries in the world and eaten all the delicacies in the world. My life in the world of Hautien is already boring, so I naturally want to break out of the sky and see other sceneries. This is what I said before. The headmaster said, secondly, you said that I am beyond the scope of human beings and should not be in the mood to find a new paradise for the human world to satisfy their curiosity. Many years ago, I also wondered if I could still be considered a human. To confirm this, I did something. What was it? Ning-Ke asked. The headmaster said, I ate a mouthful of human flesh and found that it didn't taste good. To be more precise, I was disgusted. I kept vomiting, and even vomited out the water in my stomach. Ning-Ke lowered his head and said, Human flesh does not taste good, but what does it have to do with your doubts? The headmaster said, The old yellow bull likes to eat peony fish, and the big black horse likes to eat mutton, but the old yellow bull never eats beef. I believe the big black horse will not eat horse meat either, because the old yellow bull is a bull, and the big black horse is a horse. I am interested in all kinds of meat in the world, except for human meat, because I am a human. It was a simple but illogical statement. However, it was filled with the power of intuition and could not be questioned. The headmaster continued, Since I'm still a human, living in the human world, of course I have to be a human. Many people in Hautien Taoism are different. They think that they are the people of Hautien. They will only stay in the human world for a short time and will eventually return to the embrace of Hautien. Therefore, they walk the way of heaven. This is the difference between me and them. At this time, the black horse carriage had already arrived at the academy. Among the green meadow, heat-resistant flowers were in full bloom. The scenery looked very beautiful, and one could vaguely see the back of the mountain in the fog. The headmaster did not intend to return to the back of the mountain of the academy. He let the big black horse continue forward. Ning-Ke heaved a sigh of relief and laughed happily. The headmaster glanced at him and asked, What are you so happy about? Ning-Ke waved his hand and did not explain. He was happy because the headmaster did not return to the academy. If he did not return to the academy, he would not bid farewell to the disciples in the back of the mountain. This also meant that the thing that he was most worried about would not happen. The black horse carriage went all the way to the north. The conversation between Ning-Ke and the headmaster continued. You are already so powerful, why can't you defeat Hautien? As I said, this is the world of Hautien. It is the rule of the world. Cultivators who can surpass the 5 states can have their own rules, but those rules are always under the original rules of the world. The headmaster said, In this world, every flower, grass, tree, wood, smile, and thought are all under its gaze. Even cause and effect cannot escape its calculation. For example, Lotus thinks that he can jump out of the 3 realms, but in fact, he has always been in this mountain. At this point, the headmaster glanced at Ning-Ke's waist and then at Sang-Sang. He said, As for me, even though I can ignore the rules of Hautien and be unrestrained, I cannot transcend the cause and effect that Buddha once said. Cause and effect is the order of things, and the order of things is time. Time represents everything. In this world, Hautien knows everything, so it is omnipotent. It can calculate and arrange everything, but we cannot predict and avoid it in advance. This is the so-called unpredictable and inviolable heaven's will. Ning-Ke asked, Since Hautien is omnipotent, why can't it kill you? Of course it has tried. Thunder and lightning, torrential rain, and the roaring sea. I have seen more wrath of heaven in my life than all cultivators combined. The headmaster said, But I run fast. After saying this, the headmaster waved his sleeves, and the chi of heaven and earth around the black horse carriage changed slightly. Ning-Ke's senses were extremely sharp. Now that he had entered the knowing destiny state, even the slightest change in the chi of heaven and earth could not escape his senses. He instantly sensed that the chi of heaven and earth was divided into many layers, and there was a very faint and smooth space between two layers. The human world is covered by the chi of heaven and earth, and it has its own layers. Perhaps because this world is distorted, there are some distorted passages in the layers of the chi, which can allow people to travel thousands of miles away in an instant. The headmaster said. Ning Ke said, "This is the limitless state?" The headmaster said, "Yes. If you enter the limitless state, it will be more difficult for Haotian to kill you. The problem is that you can't always escape, or you will die of exhaustion. So you have to think of other ways. I have said that I have no other strengths except for living longer. But because I have lived long enough, my state is getting higher and higher, so high that I can't learn from it. I can only explore by myself. Fortunately, I have found some ways to make it harder for Haotian to find me. I gave up this body and didn't jump out of the three realms. I went straight to the human world and integrated myself with it. If Haotian wants to kill me, it will destroy the world. But it is the rule of the world. If the world doesn't exist, it will be destroyed. So it can only find me and invite me to fight in heaven. This is a very dangerous method, because as long as it finds a part of me, it will be able to find me. However, this is also the safest method because I am everywhere. As long as my body does not appear, it will never be able to find me. Ning Ke thought for a long time and then said, "Although I still don't understand, I feel that it is very powerful." The black horse carriage came to the bank of the Sisui River. The willows were green, and the houses on the other side were quite new. Ning Ke and Sang Sang sat beside the headmaster, enjoying the scenery and resting under the shade of the willows. The story of Haotian and the headmaster was finished, but there was a very important character that was never mentioned. Ning Ke asked, "What kind of existence is Yama?" The headmaster said, "There is no Yama." Ning Ke was stunned. He turned to the headmaster and repeated, "There is no Yama?" The headmaster said, "I have been to many places and seen many sceneries, but I have never seen the underworld. Since there is no underworld, there is no Yama." Ning Ke's mind was a little confused. He said, "How can there be no Yama? Isn't the underworld going to invade the human world?" The light of Buddha array in the Lank Temple, and the many celestial artifacts left by Buddha were to deal with Yama. The headmaster said, Buddha wanted to suppress Yama. In this sense, his response before Nirvana was indeed reasonable. But in the end, he didn't know who Yama was. Ning Ke was more and more confused. He pointed to Sang Sang, who was picking willow branches to weave trinkets, and said, "She is the daughter of Yama. If there is no Yama, how can she exist?" The headmaster turned to him and said with a smile, "Silly boy, it has come to this. Do you really not understand, or do you not want to think in that direction?" The headmaster's smile was very gentle, and the expression in his eyes was very calm. But Ning Ke's heart suddenly tightened. His eyelids began to twitch, and his legs became as soft as willow branches, as if they were going to collapse. Countless drops of sweat gushed out from every part of his body like starch, instantly drenching his black academy uniform. The great spirit in his body showed signs of collapsing because of the extreme emotional tension. Ning Ke felt that his mouth was dry. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't make a sound. The headmaster looked at Sang Sang, who was weaving willow branches, and rubbed her head. He said, "Don't forget, before she became the daughter of Yama, who was chased by the human world, she was the daughter of light." Sang Sang looked up at the headmaster, not understanding what he was saying. "In fact, she has always been the daughter of light." The headmaster patted Ning Ke's shoulder and said calmly, "In other words, she is the daughter of Haotian. She is the incarnation of Haotian. You can even think of her as Haotian." Sang Sang understood this sentence, but she couldn't understand it. She felt inexplicably uneasy, and her little face suddenly became extremely pale, even whiter than the cosmetics on her face from Chinjinji Cosmetics store. Ninkei's face was paler than hers. At this time, he could finally speak, and his voice was particularly hoarse and trembling, but they all say that she is the daughter of Yama. The headmaster said, I have said many times that there is no underworld, and naturally there is no Yama. If there is, then it is just like what Buddha thought, then Haotian is Yama. Ninkei lowered his head, buried it between his knees and said, This doesn't make sense. This is the simplest truth, and even a child who just entered the school can understand it. In fact, I should have understood it long ago, but the truth is too simple. Absolute light is absolute darkness. The headmaster's gaze fell on the clear blue sky through the willow branches, and he praised, The Great Way is the simplest. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 695. Absolute light was absolute darkness. This was a simple truth that many people understood. When Prince Longqing and Ning Ke entered the second floor of the academy to compete in climbing the mountain, they had been enlightened by the headmaster's illusion. How could the headmaster, who set up the illusion, not understand? But just as he said, the Great Way was simple and invisible. Ning Ke had read the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane and the notes left by Buddha. He had lived in the desolate man's tribe for a long time. He used to be the son of Yama, and Sangsang had always been the daughter of Yama. He had a deep understanding of Yama. At this time, when he heard the headmaster's words, he suddenly understood many things that he did not understand when he read the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane and the Buddha's notes. During the desolate man's ceremony to worship Yama, they called Yama Lord Guangming, which was the Lord of Light. There were records of the immovable wisdom king in the Buddha's notes and the current Buddhism sect. In fact, he was the immovable Yama king. Ming was Ming. Yama was Akalanatha. But he still did not believe it, or he refused to believe it. He looked back and forth between the headmaster and Sangsang, and his eyes were full of pain. He said in a hoarse voice, Haotian has no reason to do so many things. Sometimes it is bright, and sometimes it is dark. Does it have nothing to do, or does it want to play a joke on the human world? God does not play a joke. It does things for a purpose. The headmaster looked at him and said, Haotian has done so many things, made such a big lie, and made such a shocking plan. Other than the need of the everlasting night, its main purpose is of course me. At that moment in the wilderness, it successfully made me believe that Sangsang was really the daughter of Yama and let me inject the power of the human world into her body. I told you how to fight against Haotian. I did not jump out of the three realms, but went straight to the human world. I integrated myself with the human world. This method is very safe, but also very dangerous. But Haotian did not find you. I am the human world, and the power of the human world is a part of me. Now a part of me is in Sangsang's body. From that moment on, it has found me. The headmaster looked at Sangsang and said with a smile, During the journey, it has been looking at me, and I have been looking at it. That's why I can't taste meat, so I took you around the world to look for meat. Sangsang looked at the shadow of the willow in the Sisui River. Her thin body trembled slightly, and she was confused and uneasy. Then, just like when she first saw the headmaster lose his temper in the wilderness, she began to feel sad. Actually, I vaguely sensed a long time ago that my fate and your fate would be intertwined. My body is in the mortal world, and my heart is concerned with the affairs of the mortal world, so my perception is not clear enough. Your eldest brother's body and mind are pure, so his perception is stronger than mine. So after he came back from the wilderness that year, he tried to keep a distance between Sangsang and me. However, at that time, he thought that Sangsang was the daughter of Yama. He didn't expect the truth. I don't believe in fate, and I don't believe that my fate is destined to be intertwined with hers. But in fact, under the arrangement of heaven, these things have long been destined. The headmaster looked at Ning Ke and said, 18 years ago, I saw you coming out of the woodshed at the back of the mountain of the academy. I also saw her birth. I saw the blood in the woodshed and the dark baby girl in Mrs. Zheng's room. But I didn't know what it meant at that time. She became the daughter of Yama in the Lank Temple, and then you took her to be chased by the human world. I had many opportunities to strike, but I didn't. Now that I think about it, it was because I had already vaguely sensed the direction of fate, so I instinctively wanted to keep a sufficient distance from this matter. Ning Ke asked sadly, Teacher, why did you choose to strike in the end? After a moment of silence, the headmaster laughed. He spread his hands and said, I don't know either. Maybe it's because I'm bored of staying in the human world. Subconsciously, I want to see what fate heaven has arranged for me. So I took advantage of this opportunity to break the barrier in my heart and fight with heaven? Don't rush to criticize me. The headmaster looked at Ning Ke and said with a smile, It's your youngest uncle's fault. After 1,000 years of cultivation, I have become calm and forbearing enough. But he insisted on going against heaven with a broken sword. Decades ago, he had already provoked my anger. Cutting the peach blossoms on the peach mountain only vented a little bit of my anger. It has accumulated for so long and eventually it will explode. Ning Ke said with a trembling voice, This battle can't be avoided? The headmaster pointed at Sang Sang and said, As I said before, a part of me is in her body. It has always been watching me, and I have always been watching it. It knows where I am, and I know where it is. So I can't refuse its invitation anymore. This battle is inevitable. Ning Ke had been thinking painfully, using all his wisdom and experience to think. Suddenly, he thought of something and his eyes brightened. He looked at the headmaster and said, No. If Yama is Haotian, why did it let the everlasting night come to the human world? I've been thinking about this these days. I've been thinking that Haotian is a farmer working hard on the land in the human world, harvesting crops one after another. No matter how fertile the land is, it needs to rest after many years of planting crops. The everlasting night is probably the time to rest. The headmaster said, There is another possibility. As humans continue to reproduce in the human world, their numbers will increase and their civilization will become more developed. The number of cultivators will increase and the number of powerhouses who can surpass the 5 states will also increase. Haotian's food source will be more abundant, but it will also start to fear. When we were eating boiled meat in the wilderness, I once told you that lions are powerful, but if there are enough bison, they will die. Ants are lowly, but if there are enough ants flying in the sky, they can cover the entire sky. Now that I think about it, Buddha said that everyone can become Buddha. Maybe this is the reason. Ning Ke said, You said earlier that Haotian is afraid that humans will reproduce and become stronger, so it developed in the human world for tens of thousands of years, and when it reaches a certain threshold, it will bring a catastrophe to destroy the world. The headmaster said, That should be the reason. Of course, this is still just our inference. As for the truth, it seems that I have to ask it face to face. Ning Ke suddenly said, I understand. The headmaster said, after a moment of silence, I understand too. Ning Ke said, Teacher, you are wrong, and so is youngest uncle. Lotus is right. The headmaster sighed and said, Yes, it seems that he is right. Ning Ke asked, Is it too late? I am already on my way, so there is no time to turn back. Moreover, this is my story. I want to see if my method works. As for how to write the story in the future, it is up to you. Ning Ke said, I am worried that I am not capable of writing this story. There is no Yama, but it can be said that there are many Yama kings. Haotian is Yama king because it wants to punish humans with the everlasting night. I am Yama king because I want to go against heaven. She is also Yama king because she is Haotian. You are also Yama king because you come from another world. According to you, the widest area of that world is extremely cold. If I can't do it, then you must. The headmaster looked at him and said, in fact, from the day you started cultivating, you have always had this ability. You can change the world, now or in the future. It is up to you. Ning Ke looked at Sang Sang. The emotions in his eyes were very complicated. No words could describe them. They were strange, familiar, sad, fearful, and struggling. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he said nothing. He looked up at the sky that was divided into many areas by the willow branches and asked, "Teacher, are you confident?" The headmaster looked up at the sky with him and sighed, "I have never really fought. Where does my confidence come from?" For countless years, the headmaster had been thinking about how to defeat Haotian. He had thought of many ways to avoid and think on the academic and spiritual level, but he had never put them into practice. Sang Sang suddenly raised her head and looked up at the sky quietly. Then she withdrew her gaze, looked at the headmaster, and said something. "In fact, I am not confident that I can defeat you." Sang Sang's feet left the grass by the river. She floated above the Sisui River. Her short yellow hair suddenly became extremely black and then grew long. It fell on her shoulders like a waterfall and looked like countless rays of light. Her black pupils turned white at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then merged with the white of her eyes. Then it became faint and almost transparent, and then there was a faint holy light enshrouding it. Two completely different emotions appeared on Sang Sang's face. One was the fear and pain of Sang Sang in the human world, and the other was the indifference that appeared on the carriage in the wilderness. Absolute indifference, the indifference with divinity that rejected life and joy. Looking at this scene, Ning Ke felt that his heart was suddenly torn into the willow branches by the Sisui River. He cried out in pain, and with blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, he reached out to grab her feet. The headmaster sighed leisurely and gently waved his sleeves, fixing him on the riverside. On the quietly flowing surface of the Sisui River, Sang Sang's body kept changing. Her thin body gradually became plump, and her black clothes were torn into countless threads, revealing her naked skin. Her long black hair fluttered in the wind, and the expression on her face became more and more painful. Her body kept twisting as if she was struggling in a net, and then gradually became still, leaving only indifference. Her torn clothes slid down like water, revealing her warm and smooth skin. The thin, ordinary, and sick Sang Sang was gone. At this time, Sang Sang appeared in the human world as a beautiful naked woman. Whether it was the facial features or the body, they were impeccable and perfect to the extreme. The perfect body and face, coupled with the holy and indifferent divinity, gave people a feeling of inviolability, as if she was the Haotian goddess worshipped by some Taoist sections. At this time, the only difference between Sang Sang and the goddess was her skin color. Her skin was still a little dark, as before. Whether it was Sang Sang in the city of Wei or Sang Sang in the old brush pen shop, her body had always been dark. But her feet were miraculously as white as jade, like two snow lotuses. Looking at this scene, the headmaster sighed and said, "Being in the dark, stepping on the light. So that's how it is." Chapter 1 and 2 more. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 696. Sang Sang's body was black like charcoal. Sang Sang's feet were white like jade. Ning Ke had bathed her and loved to sleep with her feet in his arms. He was very familiar with her body, her feet, and everything about her. At this time, looking at this perfect black and white body, he felt extremely strange. When he was a child and dug out the baby girl from the pile of corpses in Hebei province, he felt as strange as the people in the official of council's mansion. However, after so many years of raising her, he was not surprised. It was not until he saw this scene and heard the headmaster's words that he finally understood the truth. Sang Sang was black and white, just like the black chess piece she played in the last game of chess in Lang Temple. As time went by, it finally became a white chess piece in the carriage in the wilderness. At this point, Ning Ke had no hope of getting lucky. There was no Yama in this world. Haotian was Yama. There was no underworld in this world. When Haotian let the end of the world come, the human world was the underworld. Countless rays of light gushed out of Song Song's body. The calm surface of the Sisui River was like a mirror, condensing the light into a beam of light and then reflecting it to the high blue sky. The river also began to shine brightly. Countless rays of light drilled out of the headmaster's body and connected with the light that gushed out of Sang Sang. A part of him was in Song Song's body, so he could not leave. The headmaster looked at the light seeping out of his body and found it very interesting. He even reached out to touch it like playing a piano. Then he asked, "Is it time?" There was no emotion on Song Song's face, nor was there any emotion in her voice. It was impossible to tell whether she was a man or a woman. There was no fluctuation, but it was not mechanical, just transparent and empty. And the voice that came from her body had countless syllables, so complex that it was impossible to understand. It was more like the sound of nature. The headmaster understood, so he smiled. Ning Ke did not understand, but he knew that the time of separation had come. One was his most beloved teacher, the other was a woman with whom he had depended on for many years and whose lives had long since become one. There was no doubt that this was the most painful moment of choice a person could imagine. Fortunately or unfortunately, he did not have the ability to make a choice at this time, or perhaps he did not need to make a choice. Ning Ke could not move. He could only sit on the grass by the Sisui River, looking at the two people who were connected by countless threads of light. His eyes became calmer and more indifferent. No one understood what Haotian said. It was like the howling of the wind and the rumbling of thunder, resounding through the world. So the human world knew what was happening by the Sisui River. Thus, the entire world began to reverberate with this sentence. "Greetings, Headmaster." At the highest point of the Peach Mountain of the West Hill Divine Kingdom, outside the solemn Divine Hall, a crowd was kneeling on the stone ground. The usually arrogant priests in red and deacons of the Divine Hall were like the most devout believers, touching their foreheads to the ground. The hierarch lord of the West Hill Divine Palace was also kneeling behind the veil in the deepest part of the White Divine Palace. Outside the veil were the great Divine Priest of Revelation and the great Divine Priest of Judgment. "Greetings, Headmaster." Deep in the western wilderness, at the top of the giant peak in the center of the giant sinkhole, the chief preaching monk of the Xiankong Temple did not hold a staff in his hand. Instead, he put his palms together and prayed with great sincerity. In the countless yellow temples looming in the clouds on the giant peak, the chanting and the same sentence kept ringing, quietly waiting for the headmaster to ascend to heaven. "Greetings, Headmaster." Countless Taoist temples, palaces, and countless distinguished bigwigs in the human world knelt on the ground respectfully and kept repeating this sentence. Somewhere in the distant South Sea, the Taoist in indigo silently looked in the direction of the land with an extremely solemn expression on his face. He did not say that sentence because he was very nervous. He saw a big curtain was falling slowly. He had waited for too long for this moment. He could not rest assured until the end. There were still many people who did not respectfully ask the headmaster to show his divinity. Real ordinary people did not know what had happened, let alone how it would affect their lives in the human world. As usual, they bought vegetables, cooked, drank, chatted, played cards, stole incense, and fought in the field. I have been managing the affairs of the human world for too many years. I am a little tired, a little annoyed, and a little disgusted, so I don't want to manage it anymore. You see, in fact, these people in the human world do not want me to manage them either. The headmaster waved away a strand of light that floated in front of him and looked at Ning Quebec. Ning Ke could not move. He could only look and cry. So he cried loudly and tears flowed down his face. Then he began to laugh, inexplicably and nervously. The headmaster was a little depressed and said, "When Haotian finally found me in the wilderness, it was very happy and cried and laughed at the same time. Why are you acting up now?" Ning Ke suddenly found that he could move his hands. He lifted his sleeves to wipe the tears off his face and said, "I am hating." "Hating what?" "Hating your wife." The headmaster laughed and said. Ning Ke looked at the headmaster and said, "I hate you for being irresponsible." The headmaster was startled and said, "How am I irresponsible?" Ning Ke said, "If you ascend to heaven like this, what about the Tang Empire? What about the academy?" The headmaster said, "I am not even interested in such a small matter, let alone Haotian." Ning Ke said, "Even if Haotian is not interested, how about Haotian? If you can't even deal with the enemies in the human world, how can you fight against Haotian?" The headmaster smiled and said, "Besides, I am not sure to lose." The smile on the headmaster's face gradually disappeared. He looked at Sang Sang, who was floating above the Sisui River, and suddenly said, "I knew it was you in the carriage in the wilderness. And when you found me, I also found you. Have you ever thought about what I have been doing these days?" Sang Sang was expressionless, as if she did not hear the question. The strands of light on her body became more and more dense, and gradually became a stream. "I took you to eat the most delicious roast lamb leg in the world, and the most exquisite 18 plates in the kingdom of Song. I took you to eat the most delicious instant boiled mutton in the grassland. I took you to eat peony fish and oyster soup. I took you to see the snow-capped peak, boating on the sea and the mirror lake of tundra. I even let you and Ning Ke get married. I took you to eat all kinds of delicious food in the world, take you to enjoy all kinds of beautiful scenery, let you experience the greatest happiness as a human, and even let you experience deeper feelings." The headmaster looked at Sang Sang and said, "In your eyes, human beings are nonentities. Now you are married to an ant and you feel the beauty of it. You feel the full beauty of the human world. Then do you want to stay in the human world? All these years, you have tried everything to find me and invite me to fight in heaven. But have you ever thought that I also want to invite you to the human world as a guest?" In the infinite light, Sang Sang could be vaguely seen. Her thin and delicate eyebrows slightly frowned, as if the headmaster's words were indeed a threat to her. The headmaster smiled slightly. However, after a moment, her frowned eyebrows became as flat as a mirror. The light shone again and was closely connected with the headmaster. Then it was reflected on the calm surface of the Sisui River, and then it was refracted into a beam of light and shot into the blue sky. The beam of light fell into the blue sky, and a light door gradually appeared. The door was opening, and behind it was the divine kingdom of light. The moon in your dream should be the moon in the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of Arcane. It is really beautiful. The headmaster turned and looked at Ningquebec. Then he picked him up from the grass, shook his arm, and threw him to the north. The headmaster floated up, left the Sisui River, and flew to the light door in the blue sky. Before the words, "Headmaster, please show your divinity," resounded in the human world, the headmaster went back to some places. He returned to the Lu state and was silent for a moment in a hill. He returned to the Tang Empire and walked a few steps in the palace. Then he returned to the academy in the south of Chang'an. In front of the academy, the meadow was like a carpet and the flowers were like bunches. The scenery was extremely beautiful. He clasped his hands behind his back and walked along the stone path into the academy. Along the way, he met students in the front yard. Although they did not know who he was, they still bowed to him politely, because the academy required students to respect their elders. The headmaster was very satisfied. The headmaster walked into the teaching building in the front yard and said a few words to Huang He. Then he said to the female professor, "If you wear the indigo gown for too long, how can you get married in the future?" Then he left the front yard, walked through the lane, the wetland, and the old library. He glanced at the sword forest not far away. As usual, Yulien was writing small regular script with embroidery by the east window of the old library. Suddenly, a drop of ink fell from the tip of the brush and stained the golden paper. After a moment of silence, she gently put the brush on the inkstone and bowed to the window. The headmaster walked into the back mountain of the academy. Mu Yu was embroidering in the pavilion by the lake. She was overjoyed to see the headmaster and said, "You are finally back. Did you bring Sang Sang back? The food these days is terrible." Beigong Weiyang came out of the dense forest with a flute in his hand and complained, "You haven't listened to my music for 6 years. As a teacher, you can't be so biased, can you?" The water wheel by the stream was still running, and the sound of iron forging could be heard from the blacksmith's room. Occasionally, people in the dense forest of the back mountain were shouting that they could not back out of the game. Wildflowers were picked and put into their mouths and chewed into fragrant foam. The little white wolf was bitterly pecked by the big white goose. It ran wildly with its tail between its legs, looking for Tang Xiaotang. Eldest brother and second brother walked out of their respective courtyards and silently followed the headmaster to the back mountain. They walked up the steep stone path and came to the cliff. The headmaster stood on the edge of the cliff. Eldest brother and second brother knelt behind him. The headmaster looked at Chang An city in the distance and smiled. By the Sisui River. The headmaster rode the wind with his black gown fluttering in the air. Sang Sang followed him. Countless golden flowers of light overflowed from her body and sprinkled on the human world. The flowing clouds in the sky were shining with extraordinary splendor. "Welcome the headmaster." The voice echoed in the human world. The tall figure of the headmaster gradually disappeared in the light. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 697. In a certain small town in the human world, in a certain bazaar, it was bustling and chaotic, and the air was filled with the smell of rotten vegetables and chicken droppings. A man carrying a pot of wine walked into a butcher's shop. The butcher closed the shop door and brought the man up to the rooftop on the second floor. They sat down at the opposite table and began to eat and drink. The drunkard looked at somewhere in the sky and sneered. He always said that it's useless no matter how high Haotian flies. Now it seems that it doesn't matter how powerful he is. In the end, I will leave the human world and fly towards the sky. The butcher said, for the sake of those inexplicable thoughts, we have to give up eternal life and go against the heavens that we can never defeat. In the eyes of some people, this might seem very cool, but in reality, it is nothing more than foolishness. Deep in the forest of the West Hill Divine Kingdom, Chen Pippi knelt by the lake in the Jisho Abbey and kept crying at the sky. His shoulders were slumped and his body was trembling. His eyes were red and swollen, like a rabbit blinded by snow. The middle-aged Taoist stood behind him and comforted him with a sigh, "Since the headmaster has ascended to heaven, then your father can come back. At least this is a good thing." Chen Pippi's father was the Abbey Dean of Jisho Abbey. His name was Chun Mao, and he had been wearing a green Taoist robe for countless years. That was why he was called the green-clothed Taoist. Many years ago, Koharan of the academy was killed by heaven. The headmaster of the academy climbed the Peach Mountain and entered the West Hill Divine Palace. The Jisho Abbey was forced to attack with all its strength. In this battle, countless powerhouses of Haotian Taoism died or were seriously injured. Even if the Taoist in indigo asked the chief preaching monk of Xiankong Temple to help him, they still could not withstand the headmaster's rod. After that, he was forced to wander the South Sea, not daring to step foot on land for the rest of his life. The Taoist in indigo wandered among the countless islands in the South Sea, drifting with the fishing boat. He kept cultivating and had a child with a girl who was fishing for pearls in the South Sea. Then, he sent the child to the headmaster. Even so, he still couldn't set foot on land, because the headmaster did not allow him to go ashore. Today, the headmaster of the academy had finally ascended to heaven. Logically speaking, he could finally reach the shore. However, his green robes fluttered in the wind as he traveled back and forth between the countless islands in the South Sea. His figure suddenly appeared on a lush island. In the next moment, he disappeared. Thousands of miles away, his feet landed on the beach of another island. Then he disappeared again. On every island, he could only stop for a moment, and if he couldn't stop, he would have to flee for his life again. His green Taoist robe was stained with blood, and his Taoist hairstyle had long been disheveled. He was in a sorry state. That was because there was a short wooden stick that was chasing after him. Every time he teleported to an island, the wooden stick would immediately appear. His right shoulder had already been struck once by the stick. If he wasn't very familiar with the countless islands in the South Sea, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to avoid this wooden stick. He was the strongest person in the Tao sect and had entered the legendary limitless state. However, the headmaster's wooden stick was also in the limitless state. He could only continue to flee until the headmaster truly left the human world. Only then would the stick fall into the sea. There was a mountain behind the Jisho Abbey. The rocks and soil were all red like old blood. However, there were countless green vines growing on the surface of the cliff, so it looked like a green mountain. The dense green vines covered the sky, as well as the caves in the green mountains that were like ant nests. Most importantly, they covered the auras of the experts in the cave. Dozens of hoarse or sharp laughter came from the caves, penetrated the green vines, and went to the human world. These laughter were full of sadness and anger, and seemed so vicious and violent. There were many powerhouses in the Green Mountain caves, most of whom were at the peak of the knowing destiny state. Some of them had even surpassed the 5 states and become legendary. They were all seriously injured. Half of them were injured by Kuhauren of the Academy, and the other half were injured when the headmaster climbed the Peach Mountain and cut the flowers. The word Academy was the nightmare of these hidden powerhouses of Haotian Taoism. Kuhauren was punished by heaven many years ago, and today the headmaster finally ascended to heaven. There was no longer any power in the human world that could make them feel fear. They finally welcomed the time when they could see the light of day again. That was why they cried bitterly, that was why they laughed, that was why they danced with joy. Even though they were basically missing a hand or a leg, they wantonly released their aura, declaring their strength to the world. They were too presumptuous. The powerful aura not only spread to the human world, but even touched the sky. They were not worried that Haotian would punish them, because they were the most devout believers of Haotian and the most loyal subordinate. Haotian would not let them return to the divine kingdom of Haotian at this time. But they forgot that there was someone in the sky. Although the tall figure gradually disappeared in the infinite light, it had not completely left the human world. I didn't want to care about the affairs of the human world, but since you are willing to show up, then let it end well. The headmaster's voice sounded. A foot fell from the sky and stepped on the green mountain. The laughter in the green mountain suddenly turned into horrified screams and shouts of fear. Dozens of extremely powerful auras gushed out and fled to the outside of the green mountain. But it was too late. The foot landed on the green mountain. The green mountain was flat. The hidden powerhouses of Haotian Taoism were all destroyed. Above the sky in the light, the headmaster shook his foot to shake off the soil and rock chips under his shoes. He glanced at the human world, and then looked at Sang Sang and asked, "You want to go back? You can't." There was no emotion on Sang Sang's perfect face, but now she suddenly showed great fear. The light shone brightly and then dispersed. The gate of Haotian's divine kingdom collapsed. The sky began to shake, and there were even tiny cracks in some places. The tiny cracks in the sky were actually extremely wide for the human world. Countless white stones, neither gold nor jade, fell from the sky and whistled down. They rubbed against the air and turned into tens of thousands of meteorites, which fell on the vast ocean. Countless huge waves appeared on the ocean. Countless hot water mists were generated. There were countless dead fish and birds in the water mist. The human world was safe. Among the tens of thousands of meteorites, there was a stone that was almost transparent like a crystal. When the fire fell into the sea, the crystal reflected the light from the sky and drew a bright arc in the sky. It flew toward the north of the human world and finally landed somewhere unknown. At the back of the mountain of the academy, the old yellow bull was lying on the meadow listlessly. The eldest brother put a basket of the freshest grass in front of it. The second brother put a plate of the most delicious fish in front of it. The old yellow bull refused to eat grass or fish. It looked very lonely and tired. It slowly closed its eyes, and a drop of water fell from the corner of its eyes. Another drop of water fell on its cheek. Then more and more drops of water fell. The eldest brother and the second brother looked up at the sky and found that it was raining. After the headmaster ascended to the sky, the whole world began to rain. The rain was very heavy and lasted for a very long time. Most of the time, it was a torrential downpour. Occasionally, it would drizzle for a few hours, but it never stopped. This rain was destined to be recorded in history. This rain was destined to change many things in the human world. The headmaster once said that if you kept going north from any place in the world, you would eventually reach a snow-capped peak. That snow-capped peak was the coldest and northernmost place in the world. It never rained in the cold region of the far north. It only snowed. When the night lengthened and the desolate man's tribe moved south, it rarely snowed in this uninhabited and quiet place. But it even began to rain in this place. The snow layer on the surface of the hot sea was riddled with holes by the heavy rain. On the highest snow-capped peak in the world, there were several landslides and avalanches because of the heavy rain. One of the biggest gashes looked as if it had been hit by a flying rock from outer space. Ning Ke woke up. He found himself in the wilderness. The rain had stopped. He could only judge from the water drops on the grass and the muddy ground that there had been a heavy rain. He did not know how many days had passed, but it must have been a long time. He had not eaten or drunk for many days. Although his body was strong, he still felt weak. His stomach was already empty after being stuffed by the headmaster, but he did not want to eat anything. He sat in the grass after the rain, in the muddy field, hugging his knees and shivering. He looked at the sky after the rain, and his thin cheeks were very pale under the sunlight. The sky was still the same. Nothing changed. The headmaster should have lost the battle with Haotian, right? The headmaster was dead. Sang Sang was Haotian. If he went back, he would die. He was in pain. What made him the most painful was something else. It was not until now that he understood what the headmaster had said to him before he went to heaven. He could have changed everything. But for many reasons, he did not think of it, or did not want to think of it, so he did not do anything. He watched Haotian find the headmaster. He watched the headmaster go to heaven and fight, and then he lost. Ning Ke hugged his knees and looked at the sky. He just sat like this. He did not want to say anything, do anything, or think anything. He did not know what he should do. Just like this, he sat from the day to the sunset, and sat until the night came. Ning Ke looked at the darkening night sky and suddenly froze. He rose to his feet, tottering. He laughed loudly, and the laughter became louder and louder. Because his voice was very hoarse, it sounded like he was crying. He lay down on the wet grass, laughing and crying, and kicking his legs like a child. A bright moon appeared in the night sky. Of course, it was not the real moon or the moon that Ning Ke was familiar with. He had good eyesight. He did not see the crater, only the warm light. A few wolf howls came from the depths of the wilderness. They had never seen the moon, so they did not know what it was. Ning Ke knew what the bright moon was. The headmaster was still alive, still fighting in the sky, but in a different way. The headmaster had said that it must be beautiful. The scene was really beautiful. He shouted to the bright moon in the night sky, "You must win." It was written on the Ming hand scroll, "The sun and the moon cycle, light and darkness blend, endless the law of nature." The law of nature is the Tao. Tao develops the law. When the law enters the end, the night comes and the moon appears. After Buddha read the Ming hand scroll, he wrote in his notes, "The sun and the moon cycle, the light blends, and the moon should be in the night. However, countless tribulations come, and the moon cannot be seen in the eternal night." The headmaster was the moon. If the headmaster was not born, the eternal night would be like the eternal night. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 698. Writing this plot at the legendary Doomsday moment was certainly not calculated. It was just a coincidence. But just like how there is no real doomsday, stories are always full of hope. For me, there are usually two situations when I write to swear. One is when it is too difficult and I feel that I have written it badly. The other is when it is too difficult and I feel that I have written it well. After writing for so many years, if you still remember, I often couldn't help but slap the table at the end of a chapter in praise. It is too King well written. This was indeed too narcissistic. I was criticized and ridiculed, so I said it less and less and have been tolerating it. But I don't want to tolerate it at this time. I am King well written. All the uneasiness suddenly disappeared after the first chapter came out. I have no reason not to be confident. Some readers say that I like characters who abuse their popularity, but it's not like that. This is a matter of principle, just like the change of office. A long time ago, a friend said, last year, that you will definitely write the headmaster to death. I said that it depends on what kind of death you understand. I am very satisfied with this plot arrangement. In my concept and plot, the old man is certainly not dead. He only continues to fight in the sky, while Ning Ke stays in the human world to fight. As for the ending of these two battles, I am looking forward to it. I hope I can write it well. Now back to some of the initial questions in this book. Why is there no moon in this world? First of all, this is not our current world. It should not have or only one moon. Secondly, I purposely do not want there to be a moon in this world, because I want to wait for the moon to appear in this chapter. Everything he did was to serve the headmaster of the academy and to elicit that sentence. If the headmaster is not born, the ages will be like a long night. This is the evaluation of the headmaster, and also the emotional judgment I put into it. I am very satisfied at this time. There is another sentence in this story, or rather a word, that I have been looking forward to for a long time. I will continue to write it and write it out for everyone to see. I suddenly thought that if this plot appeared at the end of the month, it would be great. But the cycle of the sun and the moon is natural. It should appear at this time, so it will appear at this time. At this time, I must work hard to get the monthly vote. When the double at the end of the month, I will continue to ask for more. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 699. This was the longest and most extensive reign in recorded human history. It lasted from the height of summer all the way to the beginning of autumn. It was beyond everyone's imagination. The rain continued to fall from the sky, landing on the mountains, rivers, plains, and lakes. After being washed by the rain, cliffs began to collapse, official roads were destroyed, rivers burst their banks, and floods flooded. Such a serious natural disaster was enough to make the whole world feel desperate. Fortunately, the West Hill Divine Palace and the royal families of various countries quickly launched disaster relief. Once again, in the face of serious natural disasters, human beings showed terrible vitality and endurance. They were not knocked down, but calmly accepted and fought hard. The heavy rain also fell on the wilderness. The fields were muddy and soft, and it became extremely difficult to walk on it. The herdsmen could not graze, so they had to hide in their tents and suffer. Even the horse gang hid in the forest by Shubi Lake and kept sighing at the rain. After the war in the wilderness, the Tang army divided into two groups and retreated. Among them, the northeast border military arrived at Tuyang City in the south before the rain fell. The cavalry of the northern military camp stayed in Helan City for a while, but were forced to stay by the endless rain. Although the Empire spared no manpower and resources and had been investing for hundreds of years, Helan City was far away in the wilderness, and the buildings in the city were limited. Tens of thousands of cavalry of the northern military camp filled all the tents and residences in the city, but a large part of them were still forced to settle in the city tower. The city tower was high between the cliffs, and the cold wind passed through it at night. The temperature at the turn of summer and autumn should have been suitable for camping, but it had been raining for many days. Autumn came early to the wilderness, and the temperature suddenly dropped. Helan General Han Qing had spent these days trying to keep the cavalry of the northern military camp warm. The most troublesome problem was the supply of food. Helan City had a lot of food reserves, but with the addition of tens of thousands of Tang soldiers and countless horses, the pressure on them suddenly increased. They could barely hold on for a while, but if the rain continued, the food from the south could not be delivered, and they could not leave. Then Helan City would face the danger of food shortage. All kinds of problems and troubles came together to form all kinds of danger. However, no matter if it was the cavalry commander of the northern camp or General Han Qing, they did not dare to use this problem to ask the emperor, who they should ask the most. They did not dare to disturb the empress or grandmaster Huang Yang, because his majesty was sick, very sick. The great Tang emperor, Li Zhongyi, was a man who valued friendship and righteousness, but this did not mean that he was inflexible and ignorant of worldly affairs. When he was a prince, he was the most powerful general in the world. In the past 20 years after he ascended the throne, he appeared to be very calm and low-key, but no one dared to look down on him. To the emperors of the South Jin Kingdom, the Yueluan Kingdom, Yan, Qi, Song, and Chun kingdoms, the Tang emperor was definitely at the top of their death list. At all times, there were countless people secretly praying that he would suffer from an incurable disease, cursing him to die from it. In reality, not many people knew that many years ago, Li Zhongyi had contracted an illness. Moreover, this illness was very serious and had always accompanied him. It was ingrained into his internal organs and bones, and there was no way to cure it. The headmaster of the academy had seen the emperor's illness. Perhaps the illness was too troublesome, or the headmaster of the academy had seen the abyss of fate after the illness, so he only wrote a prescription and did not use any human power. The illness dragged on until the autumn of the 18th year of the Tianqi era. With the arrival of the giant golden dragon, with the continuous cold rain, and with a fated stray arrow, the illness broke out. The emperor leaned against the couch, his face pale. He held a handkerchief in his hand, which was stained with blood. The empress lowered her head and did not speak. She gently rubbed his chest, trying to make him feel better. Many people have died in Chang'an over the past few years. Many old people who had accompanied my father and even my grandfather have died before me. Now, even the headmaster has left us. Now I can't do it either. The emperor held her hand and said, "Heaven wants the Tang Empire to die, and it is not because of war. Even so, I have no fear, because I believe that the Tang Empire will win in the end." Hot tears fell from the empress' eyes. At this time, the emperor was holding her hand, so the tears fell onto the tightly clasped hands and became splashes. "I am the most powerful man in the world. I married the woman I loved the most, and in the end, I died on the road to conquer the world. I have no regrets in this life, so don't be sad," the emperor said. The empress raised her head and said with tears on her face, "But I have a lot of regrets. I haven't seen what you look like when you grow old. I haven't let you see little Six grow up. I regret even more that I went south to Chang'an under the orders of the sect, seduced and lied to you, and finally hurt you like this." The emperor smiled and said, "Seduced and lied to me, and finally, you still fell in love with me." Listening to the sweet and sour words, The Empress finally smiled with tears in her eyes and asked, "Have you ever blamed me? It would be a lie to say that I have never blamed you. After all, who doesn't want to live longer?" The Emperor reached out and wiped away the tears on her cheeks. He said, "But later on, I thought that the war between you and me would end with my victory. Then, my injuries would be a mark of glory." The Empress gently hugged him and murmured, "From the moment I saw you, I lost." The Emperor smiled contentedly. He had fought in countless battles in his life, but only this one was the most unforgettable and the most important to him. "If I wasn't the Emperor, I would be a student of the Academy. Now that I think about it, that kind of life might be more interesting. But after all, the headmaster of the Academy is my teacher." The Emperor smiled tiredly and looked at her. He said, "Now that my teacher is working in heaven, we still have to work in the human world. After I go with my teacher, do you know what to do?" The Empress said, "Your Majesty, rest assured. I know what to do." The Emperor said, "I asked Little Six to be Mr. First's disciple because I want him to learn the way of benevolence. If the two children don't mess around, then let them live." The Empress stopped crying and said very calmly, "I will do these things well. Then I can rest assured." The Emperor said and then slowly closed his eyes. Master Huang Yang walked into the room. The Empress looked at the Emperor, who seemed to be asleep for a long time. Then she took off the rosary on her wrist and put it on his wrist. She bent down and kissed his forehead gently. Master Huang Yang put his palms together. After a moment, the chanting of scriptures sounded in the room. The reincarnation scripture. It was also raining in Chang'an. The rain was heavy and mixed with thunder. Lightning flashed occasionally, illuminating the quiet and empty palace as if it were daytime. Even with a lampshade, the candlelight still swayed restlessly. If there was no lampshade, the candlelight would probably have been extinguished. Li Yu sat behind the table and looked at the beautiful candlestick next to the pillar. She was a little distracted. Her black hair was slightly wet, and so was her palace dress. She must have gone somewhere in the rain. Her face was a little pale, not because she was afraid of thunder and lightning, but because she believed that what she had done was right. Even if she was in a dark room, she did not feel guilty. Looking at the night rain outside the hall, 2 lines of tears flowed from the corners of her eyes, slid down her pale cheeks, and fell on the memorial on the table, wetting a line of ink. Li Yu came to her senses and ordered a eunuch to bring a coarse paper dipped in water. She carefully wiped the wet marks on the memorial, and then wiped the tears off her face. She calmly and attentively continued to read the memorial. This memorial was a summary of the flood situation in all the counties of the empire. It was very important. She picked up a brush and began to read the memorial. Guarding the dikes, storing water, disaster relief, epidemic prevention, military mobilization, and keeping an eye on the riders in the eastern wilderness. The Tang Empire was very big and there were many things to do. She had already adapted to it and handled it in an orderly manner. As she continued to read the memorial, her expression became calmer and calmer, even more determined. Late at night, after a busy day of government affairs, Li Yu put on a cloak and left the palace alone under the heavy protection of the Yulin royal guards and guards. She did not bring any eunuchs or palace maids with her. She did not go far, just to the Southern Gate Temple opposite the imperial city. The Southern Gate Temple, shrouded in the heavy rain, seemed particularly desolate and quiet. Li Yu walked into the Taoist temple. Deep in the black paulownia floor, there was an oil lamp beside the soft mattress, illuminating the gaunt and thin face of the nation master of Tang, Li Qingshan. She walked to Li Qingshan and slowly knelt down. She said in a trembling voice, "Father, I'm leaving." Li Qingshan slowly closed his eyes and then opened them again. There was only sadness in his eyes, not shock. For hundreds of years, Helan City had used the 1,000-mile messenger talisman twice in a row in a few months. The first time was because of the black horse carriage. The second time was to send the news of His Majesty's passing back to Chang'an City. At this time, only a few people in the entire Chang'an city knew this news. Li Yu relied on the help of the Southern Gate Temple to keep this secret temporarily. Looking at Li Qingshan's expression, she knew that he already knew. Since she relied on the Southern Gate Temple to keep the secret, she naturally could not hide it from the temple master of the Southern Gate Temple. Li Qingshan looked at her kneeling in front of him and said weakly, "What do you want to do?" Li Yu said, "I want to see the edict." The edict of the succession of the Tang Emperor was not in the palace, but in the Southern Gate Temple. Li Qingshan said, "According to the law of the Tang Empire, the edict should be announced in public before the civil and military officials." Li Yu looked down at her soaked skirt and said, "The civil and military officials do not know yet." Li Qingshan said, "They will know eventually." Li Yu said, "I do not want to hide the news of father's passing for too long. I will inform everyone later." Li Qingshan said, "Then why did your highness come here in advance?" After a long silence, Li Yu said, "Because I am worried." Li Qingshan also fell into a long silence. Li Yu lowered her head even more, and water droplets dripped from the ends of her black hair. Her body fell along with the water droplets, and her forehead touched the black floor. According to the agreement, there are 2 chapters today. This is the first one. There is still one more. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 700. Please help me. Why should I help your highness? Because I am a Tang. The 6th prince is also a Tang. But his mother is not a Tang. The Tang Empire is open-minded and tolerant. We don't care about these things. Please believe me. Why should I believe your highness? Because you don't believe the empress. Li Yu looked at the familiar handwriting on the edict and suddenly felt very sad. It was her father's handwriting. Just like the rumors, no matter how much he loved calligraphy and how diligently he practiced, he could not make his handwriting look better. However, from the meticulous handwriting, it could be seen that her father was very calm and determined when he wrote these words, without any hesitation or struggle. Li Yu's hand holding the edict trembled slightly. She exerted force with her fingers as if they were about to sink into the yellow cloth. The trembling spread from her forearm to her shoulder, and her entire body began to tremble. She felt extremely disappointed and sad, and then began to feel angry, not only because of the content of the edict, but also because of her father's handwriting on the edict was so stable. "Why is it like this?" she whispered. Then she repeated it again, her voice full of grievance and unwillingness. "Why is it like this?" Her voice was a little louder than before, but it still could not pass through the Taoist temple and the night rain outside. It was even louder than the sound of her teeth chattering. Li Qingshan said, "This was written by His Majesty before he personally went to war. Since he left the edict, it means that he also vaguely sensed the direction of heaven's will. However, you should also be able to see that he made up his mind a long time ago." Li Yu was silent for a long time. Suddenly, she raised her head and wiped the tears on her face with her sleeve. She looked at Li Qingshan on the sickbed and said with a trembling voice, "Can the edict be changed?" Li Qingshan slightly drooped his eyelids and said, "Generally not." Li Yu's eyes lit up and she asked, "What is not generally?" Li Qingshan glanced at her and said, "When the country is in danger." Li Yu asked, "Who can change it?" Li Qingshan said, "I can." The edict of the Tang Emperor could not be easily forged. There was the royal seal and complex emblems on it. Most importantly, there was a unique imprint of the aura of heaven and earth on it. Part of that imprint came from the bloodline of the royal family, and part of it came from the witnesses of the edict. Before His Majesty left Chang'an, when he wrote the edict in the Southern Gate Temple, the witnesses were his most trusted master of nation, Li Qingshan, and his younger brother, Master Huang Yang. And the imperial seal was in the palace at this time, on the couch of Li Yu, who was supervising the country. Looking at Li Qingshan's old and thin face, Li Yu asked in a trembling voice, "What do you want?" Li Qingshan looked at the slightly wet, beautiful woman before him. He felt like he was looking at the little girl who followed her mother around and acted like a spoiled child. He smiled in reminiscence. Then he said calmly, "I want the Tang Empire to prosper for generations to come. I want the South School of Haotian Taoism to flourish. I want the Tangs to live a carefree life. Your Highness, can you promise me that?" Li Yu left the Southern Gate Temple. It was believed that the shocking news would soon pass through the storm and reach the mansions of the princes and ministers in Chang'an. Tomorrow was not the day of the Grand Court Conference, but there was bound to be one. In the rain, the southern gate was still quiet, as if nothing had happened. The oil lamp was like a bean. It could only illuminate the corner of the Taoist temple. He Mingqi knelt in front of the oil lamp. Half of his body was in the shadow. Li Qingshan lay on the sickbed and looked up. It was as if he could see the rain falling on the Taoist temple. He frowned and sighed. "I changed the edict today and violated the law of the Tang Empire. I also violated His Majesty's last wish. I don't know what will be written in the history books after I die, and how will His Majesty think of me?" He Mingqi was silent. It was inappropriate for him to say anything at this time. "But I won't regret it. Because Your Highness is right. Rather than saying that I trust her and Prince Huiyuan, I can't trust the Empress. How can I let the Saintess of Diabolism become the master of the Tang Empire?" Li Qingshan said indifferently, "If it wasn't for her, His Majesty wouldn't have died so young." He Mingqi raised his head and glanced at him. The officials and people in the court all thought that the Empress and the Nation Master were close. Who would have thought that the truth was true? In recent years, there have been too many funerals in Chang'an. Senior statesmen of 3 dynasties and veterans of the battlefield have all passed away. Now His Majesty is dead, and even the headmaster of the academy is dead. If this is not God's will, then what is? Li Qingshan turned to He Mingqi and said, "If I remember correctly, you are from Qinghe Prefecture?" He Mingqi lowered his head and answered, "My family is from the He clan of Qinghe Prefecture." Li Qingshan squinted his eyes and said, "The He clan that once had a great divine priest of West Hill?" He Mingqi said after a moment of silence, "Yes." Li Qingshan looked at his favorite disciple and sighed. He said, "It seems that I was right. You really work for the Hierarch Lord. No wonder you are so interested in the God-stunning array." He Mingqi felt that his body suddenly became very cold. He leaned forward and put his hands on the black wooden floor. He trembled slightly and did not know what to say. The Hierarch Lord wants to lead the papal cavalrymen into Chang'an and bring the Tang Empire back to the glory of the West Hill Divine Palace. That's why he wants to break the God-stunning array more than anyone else. Li Qingshan said, "You have been cultivating in the Southern Gate Temple for so many years. Your goal is to find the array I pestle. Unfortunately, you have no talent in talisman Taoism, so senior brother Yen Sei could not take you as a disciple. The array I pestle was given to Ning Quebec. Now it is in the academy, so you have no way to get it. So you have to go to the small building in the palace to see if there is any other way to break the array." Only then did He Mingqi realize that what he had done these years could not be hidden from his teacher's eyes. Speaking of which, how could the nation master of the Tang Empire be so gullible? He asked in a trembling voice, "Since you know all this, why didn't you expose me?" Li Qingshan said, "Because you are my favorite disciple. Because I am also struggling." Struggling? Xia Ho was born in the Devil's Doctrine, but he became a visiting professor of Haotian Taoism and a general of the Tang Empire. He has been in pain all his life. I believe in Haotian and am loyal to the Tang Empire. How can I not be in pain? In the past, I didn't struggle or feel pain because I didn't have to choose. I knew that if the Great Tang continued down its current path, it would walk very smoothly and well, but now that the situation has undergone a massive change, I want to choose a relatively stable path for the Great Tang, so I chose your highness and did not expose you. Li Qingshan said, people say that Chang'an is unbreakable and the cultivation world praises the power of the god-stunning array. But how many people know that the real unbreakable one is the headmaster? If the headmaster is not dead, you would be dead now. He looked at He Mingqi and said, but the headmaster is still dead. This once again proves that Haotian is unbeatable. Haotian Taoism will not let the Academy or the Tang Empire off. And this time, without the headmaster, the Academy can no longer fight against the whole world as it has for thousands of years. So the Tang Empire will lose. If the Tang Empire wants to survive, it can only return to the embrace of Haotian. I know you have an agreement with Prince Huiyuan. But don't forget that the Tangs are also believers of Haotian. You are also a Tang. So I hope you can make the process less bloody. He Mingqi was silent for a long time. Then he kowtowed heavily and said, I will fight for it with my life. The rain continued, but Chang'an seemed to have snowed. The 1,000-year-old ancient city turned white overnight. Countless banners fluttered on the street. The people who stood under the eaves to shelter from the rain looked sorrowful. Many people even wore mourning clothes. Only a small part of this mournful whiteness was dedicated to the headmaster. Because the headmaster was not prominent, not many ordinary people knew that the guardian of the world had left. The people of Chang'an mourned and missed the guardian of the Tang Empire. Their kind and wise emperor, who had won the hearts of the people, had passed away. It was worth it in exchange for the cries of countless people. The civil and military officials knelt in the rain in front of the palace hall. The officials' official robes were already wet, and the generals' armors were washed by the rain. A eunuch stood in front of the stone steps and read the edict. Several grand secretaries, ministers, and important generals stood behind the eunuch. Their expressions were different. Some were surprised, some were pleasantly surprised, but the bottom line was sadness. The Tang Empire had not had time to wake up from its sadness before it welcomed its new master. Li Huiyuan walked to the chair in the center of the hall and sat down. From this moment on, he was no longer a prince, but the emperor. His face was still unhealthy pale, but he was no longer immature, nor did he look unnaturally noble. The indifference in his eyes had long turned into majesty, but his expression was natural and gentle. It was not until then that the officials of the Tang Empire realized that the prince had grown up. Looking at the new emperor, who was gradually becoming more and more valiant, sitting on the chair, there was an old minister who was the only one left. Looking at the face that resembled his father, he was moved to tears. The officials and generals on the Queen's side knelt down with their colleagues. They were silent and respectful, but their hearts were heavy. They even had doubts about the edict. However, the edict could not be forged, so their doubts had no evidence. They could only wait for the Queen to bring another prince back to Chang'an with the coffin of the former emperor. Before that, they could only place their hopes on two places that could change everything. A minister went to the academy, but the academy closed its doors and did not receive any guests. The minister then remembered that the headmaster of the academy had passed away. A minister went to the Southern Gate Temple. Later, people in the court learned that the edict of the emperor was kept there, so they wanted to ask the nation master, Li Qingshan. The door of the Southern Gate Temple opened, and He Mingqi walked out with a white cloth belt around his waist. The nation master, Li Qingshan, had passed away. From now on, he was the new Abbey Dean of the Southern Gate Temple, and also the master of the South School of Haotian Taoism. There are many great reviews in the book review section. Some are about the headmaster of the academy, some are about Sangsang, some are about the general trend of the world, and some are about Ning Kei's future battle. If you are interested, you can go and read it. It's very good. Tomorrow is Saturday and there will be no updates. I will also take a good rest. I was wrong when I said I would take a break. On the day I said I would take a break, I updated 3 chapters. Please understand. In addition, I will continue to publish on Sunday. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.